The Stargate's inner ring locked into position with its seventh chevron, the sound reverberating through the concrete and steel chamber buried deep within Cheyenne Mountain. The event horizon exploded outward in its violent whoosh before settling into the shimmering vertical pool of impossible blue. Airmen raised their weapons toward the active wormhole, while klaxons blared their warning into every corridor of the SGC. In the control room above, technicians scrambled to verify what their instruments already confirmed. No IDC transmission, no scheduled return, and energy readings spiking beyond anything in their database. Unscheduled off-world activation. The technician's voice crackled over the intercom with professional urgency. Iris is holding. No identification code received. General Hammond stood at the control room window, hands clasped behind his back as he studied the rippling surface of the wormhole below. 23 years of Air Force command had taught him that the universe specialized in surprises, but the energy fluctuations dancing across his monitors suggested something unprecedented was forcing its way through from the other side. Major Samantha Carter appeared at his shoulder, eyes already tracking the data streams flowing across her tablet. "General, the power consumption is off the charts," she said, her astrophysicist's mind already calculating impossible variables. "Whatever's trying to come through is fighting the wormhole's standard termination protocols. It's like something's caught between dimensions." The event horizon pulsed, colors shifting through spectrums that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Hammond's jaw tightened. In the gate room below, SG-1's leader Colonel Jack O'Neill had taken position behind a concrete blast barrier, P-90 trained on the Iris. Beside him, TLC stood with staff weapon ready, the Jaffa's expression revealing nothing of the calculated threat assessment happening behind his eyes. Dr. Daniel Jackson hovered near the ramp, linguistic expertise offering little practical value against whatever might emerge, but his curiosity keeping him closer to danger than self-preservation would recommend. "Sir, the wormhole's destabilizing." Carter's voice rose slightly. "If something doesn't come through in the next 15 seconds, the energy discharge could." The event horizon convulsed. Reality twisted at the Iris's edge where the titanium barrier sat 3 micrometers from the wormhole's surface. For one impossible moment, the laws governing matter and energy seemed negotiable. Then a figure materialized in the space between dimensions, not through the Iris, but somehow around it, as if the universe itself had decided the barrier was merely a suggestion. He hit the metal ramp with the solid weight of muscle and bone, rolling with practiced grace that spoke of a lifetime dodging things meant to kill him. 2 swords crossed his back, their leather-wrapped hilts visible above broad shoulders covered in worn black leather. White hair, tied back in a style that belonged to no military unit Hammond recognized, framed a face marked by scars and the kind of weariness that suggested he'd seen too much and lived too long. Amber eyes, cat-like, reflecting the gate room's harsh lights like an animal's, swept across the weapons pointed at him with the assessment of a predator evaluating potential threats. The man moved before anyone could fire. Not attacking, studying. His right hand touched something at his chest, a medallion partially hidden beneath leather armor, and his expression shifted from confusion to grim recognition. The medallion vibrated visibly against his sternum. "Weapons down." Hammond's voice cut through the comm system with the authority of a man who'd made career-defining decisions in fractions of seconds. Something in the stranger's posture spoke of capability without immediate hostility, and premature gunfire in the gate room had complicated enough first contacts already. "Colonel O'Neill, secure the visitor for medical examination and interrogation. Full containment protocols." O'Neill advanced with his weapon still raised, flanked by 4 SF guards whose fingers rested firmly on triggers. The white-haired man's eyes tracked each movement with unnatural precision, pupils contracting and dilating as he adjusted to the artificial lighting. He made no move toward the swords on his back, but every line of his body suggested readiness to violence if the situation demanded it. "Hands where I can see them," O'Neill commanded, voice carrying the casual authority of a man who'd held countless beings at gunpoint across the galaxy. "Nice and slow." We can do this the easy way or the way that involves a lot of paperwork for me." The stranger complied, raising his hands with deliberate care. When he spoke, his voice carried an accent Hammond couldn't place, Eastern European perhaps, but colored by inflections that suggested multiple languages learned across a lifetime of travel. "Where am I? What was that portal?" "We'll be asking the questions," O'Neill replied, though his eyes had caught on the swords with the interest of a man who'd faced enough bladed weapons to respect their presence. "Starting with who you are and how you got past our iris without becoming a stain on titanium." The stranger's amber eyes fixed on O'Neill with unsettling directness. "Geralt. I'm a witcher." He paused, apparently recognizing the term meant nothing. "A monster hunter. I was tracking a creature through a portal when—" He stopped, reassessing his situation with visible calculation. "This isn't where I was meant to arrive." In the control room, Carter's tablet chimed with new data. "General, I'm reading unusual bioelectric patterns from the subject. His cellular structure is registering mutations I've never seen in human physiology. Enhanced muscle density, neurological modifications, and something in his blood chemistry that's making our sensors think he's been exposed to massive radiation but showing zero tissue damage." Hammond studied the figure on the ramp below. A monster hunter. The universe had thrown them warrior cultures, ascended beings, parasitic false gods, and civilizations spanning every stage of development. But this white-haired swordsman with eyes that caught light like a predator's represented something new, something enhanced beyond standard human parameters, but clearly still human in origin. "Take him to the infirmary," Hammond ordered. "Dr. Fraser will conduct a full examination. I want armed guards at every exit and someone monitoring him at all times." He turned to Carter. "Major, I want a complete analysis of how he bypassed the iris. If there's a vulnerability in our defense system, I need to know about it." Below, SF guards closed in with restraints. Geralt submitted to being searched and bound with the patience of someone who'd been detained by authorities before, though his eyes never stopped tracking exits and potential weapons. They relieved him of the 2 swords, one steel, one silver. A collection of small vials containing liquids in colors no standard chemistry would produce, and several pouches whose contents included dried herbs that made the medic handling them sneeze violently. As they led him toward the exit, Geralt's medallion hummed again. His head turned sharply toward TLC, amber eyes narrowing as he studied the Jaffa with sudden intensity. The medallion's vibration increased. TLC met the scrutiny with his characteristic calm, but his grip on the staff weapon shifted fractionally. "You possess unusual perception, Geralt of the Witchers." "You're carrying something," Geralt said quietly, his voice carrying the certainty of a man who'd spent a lifetime identifying threats. "A parasite. Symbiotic, but not entirely willing on your part." His eyes tracked to the golden emblem on TLC's forehead. "You serve something that claims divinity." The gate room went very still. O'Neill's eyebrows rose slightly, a gesture that conveyed both surprise and grudging respect. "Well, this is either going to make the interrogation really short or really complicated." Hammond leaned forward in the control room, studying the white-haired stranger with renewed attention. "Monster hunter. Enhanced abilities. And apparently able to sense the Goa'uld symbiote in TLC's pouch within moments of arrival. Whatever had come through their Stargate, it wasn't just a lost traveler from some backwater world. It was a hunter. And if his instincts were already identifying the Goa'uld as parasites, the question became whether Earth had just found an ally or unleashed something that would see their carefully balanced galactic politics as targets for extermination. The guards escorted Geralt from the gate room, his white hair disappearing through the blast doors as the Stargate shut down behind him with its characteristic whoosh of disengaging energy. The event horizon collapsed, leaving only questions and the faint scent of ozone mixing with whatever alchemical compounds had been in those pouches. Hammond straightened, decision crystallizing. "SG-1, debrief in 20 minutes. Dr. Fraser, I want preliminary medical results within the hour." And someone find out what a witcher is and why one just bypassed our best defense system like it wasn't there. Carter was already pulling up historical databases, searching for any reference to enhanced humans in the Goa'uld's extensive catalog of slave worlds. Daniel had that expression suggesting he was mentally rifling through every obscure mythology and ancient text he'd memorized. TLC remained motionless, but his dark eyes reflected the questions they were all thinking. Whatever Geralt of Rivia was, whatever mutations made him something more than human but less than alien, he'd arrived during the height of the Goa'uld War carrying swords and hunting monsters. And in a galaxy where parasitic snakes wore human faces and claimed godhood, Earth might have just acquired exactly the kind of specialist they needed. Or the kind of problem that would make Apophis look simple by comparison. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Indeed. Dr. Janet Fraser had examined Jaffa physiology, treated Goa'uld symbiote rejection, and once performed emergency surgery on an Asgard whose biology defied every principle of human medicine. None of it prepared her for Geralt of Rivia. He sat on the examination table with the stillness of someone conserving energy, amber eyes tracking every movement she made while two armed SF guards maintained position by the door. His chest was bare now, revealing musculature that spoke of decades conditioning for violence. Scar tissue crisscrossed his torso in patterns suggesting he'd survived things that should have been fatal. But it was the blood work scrolling across her monitor that made her question whether she was still dealing with baseline human genetics. "Your red blood cell count is 40% higher than human standard," she said, keeping her voice professionally neutral while her mind raced through impossible implications. "Your white blood cells are attacking pathogens I exposed them to with efficiency I've only seen in Tok'ra symbiote healing. And something in your blood is producing antibodies against diseases you've never been exposed to." Geralt's expression didn't change. "Witcher mutations. We're made, not born. Made." Fraser set down her tablet, meeting those unsettling amber eyes directly. "Someone did this to you deliberately? The trials of the grasses. Alchemical mutagens combined with magical rituals." His voice carried the flat tone of someone reciting facts long since accepted. 3 out of 10 boys survive. The rest die screaming or worse. Those who live become witchers, enhance strength, speed, healing. We can see in darkness, hear heartbeats from across a room, and survive injuries that would kill normal humans. We're designed to hunt monsters that threaten villages too poor or weak to defend themselves. The clinical detachment in his voice didn't hide the underlying bitterness. Fraser had heard enough soldiers describe their training to recognize trauma buried under professional necessity. "How old are you, Geralt?" "I've stopped counting precisely. Over 100 years. Mutations slow aging." Fraser pulled up the bone density scans, studying the data with growing fascination and horror. His skeletal structure showed signs of deliberate reinforcement, not natural development, but calculated enhancement. Whoever had created Witchers understood human physiology well enough to push it past natural limits without completely destroying the subject. The process was barbaric, but the results were undeniably effective. "The eyes," she continued, noting how his pupils contracted sharply when she aimed her penlight. "Cat-like tapetum lucidum. That's not a human trait. Enhanced night vision. Sensitivity to bright light." Geralt tilted his head fractionally. "You're examining me like I'm a specimen." "In my experience, that leads to people wanting to replicate the process. I should tell you now, the trials have been lost for decades. The mages who created the mutagens are dead, and the formulas died with them. I'm a doctor, not a recruiter for enhanced soldier programs." Fraser replied sharply, though she suspected the NID would feel differently once they learned about Geralt's capabilities. "Though I imagine General Hammond will want to understand exactly what you're capable of before deciding whether you're a security risk." A ghost of something that might have been humor crossed Geralt's scarred face. "In my world, people call Witchers mutants, freaks, abominations. They hire us to kill monsters, then throw stones at us in the streets afterward. I've learned to live with being a security risk." Before Fraser could respond, the infirmary door opened. General Hammond entered, followed by the full SG-1 team. O'Neill leaned against the wall with studied casualness, but his eyes remained fixed on Geralt with the assessment of a career Special Forces operator evaluating potential threat level. Carter carried a tablet displaying sensor data, her scientific curiosity barely contained behind military professionalism. "Fraser." Hammond's voice carried command room authority even in the medical bay. "Your assessment?" "Sir, the subject, Geralt, is human, but extensively modified through a process he describes as alchemical and magical in origin. His physical capabilities are enhanced across every measurable parameter. Strength, speed, reflexes, healing, sensory perception, all significantly beyond human baseline. His blood contains compounds I can't identify, and his neurological structure shows deliberate alterations that would kill anyone without his specific mutations." Hammond absorbed this with the calm of a man who'd stopped being surprised by impossible biology around the time they'd discovered the Goa'uld. "And the medical risk? Disease transmission, contamination? His immune system is so aggressive I'm more worried about our germs affecting him than vice versa. He's effectively walking biological warfare against any pathogen I've tested." Fraser glanced at Geralt. "Though he did mention something about potions that enhance his abilities further. I'd like to analyze those compounds." "They're toxic," Geralt said flatly. "Designed to push mutated metabolism past safe limits. Normal humans would die from a single swallow. Even for Witchers, prolonged use causes cumulative damage." Carter stepped forward, tablet extended to show energy readings. "Mr. Geralt, when you arrived, you somehow bypassed our iris, a titanium barrier that should have atomized you at molecular level. Our sensors detected dimensional fluctuations during your transit, as if you existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously." Her voice carried genuine scientific excitement. "Can you explain what happened?" Geralt's jaw tightened. "I was tracking a creature through a magical portal, a rift between worlds caused by something called the conjunction of spheres. The creature fled through an unstable opening. I followed, and something pulled me sideways through." He gestured toward the door, toward the gate room beyond. "That circle of stone with the water that isn't water. I felt reality twist, felt myself coming apart and reforming, and when I solidified, your barrier wasn't there anymore. Or I wasn't entirely physical when I crossed it." "The Stargate," Daniel said, unable to contain himself any longer. "That circle of stone is a Stargate, an ancient transportation device built millions of years ago by a race called the Ancients. It creates stable wormholes connecting thousands of worlds across the galaxy. You emerge during an incoming wormhole, which means you came from somewhere in the Gate network." His eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for discovering new dead languages. "You mentioned the conjunction of spheres. That sounds like a cosmological event, multiple dimensions intersecting. If your magical portal intersected with an active wormhole at the precise moment of dimensional overlap." "You got lucky," O'Neill interrupted. "Or unlucky, depending on perspective. Point is, you're here, you've got freaky eyes and more muscles than should fit on a human frame, and you've already identified TLC's passenger on sight." He pushed off the wall, approaching with deceptive casualness. "So here's the situation. We're a top-secret military operation protecting Earth from hostile alien forces. That big metal ring is our primary method of traveling to other planets." "And the parasites you sensed?" "They're called Goa'uld, snake-like aliens that take human hosts and pretend to be gods." Geralt's amber eyes fixed on TLC. "And he carries one willingly?" "I am Jaffa," TLC responded, his deep voice carrying quiet dignity. "My people were genetically altered by the Goa'uld to serve as incubators for their young. The symbiote grants enhanced strength and healing but requires us to carry the parasite until maturity. I have chosen to rebel against the false gods I once served." The symbiote keeps me alive, but I am slave to either ignore the system lords. The Witcher studied TLC for a long moment, that predatory assessment giving way to something resembling understanding, enhanced by others for purposes not your own. Made into a weapon and expected to be grateful. His scarred face held no judgment. I know what that feels like. Indeed. Hammond cleared his throat, redirecting the conversation. Mr. Geralt, you've found yourself in the middle of a war. The Goa'uld have enslaved human populations across this galaxy for thousands of years. They possess advanced technology, massive armies, and the arrogance to believe they're actually gods. Earth has been their target since we reactivated the Stargate, and we're fighting to keep them from conquering or destroying our world. And you want to know if I'm a threat or an asset? Geralt finished, his tone suggesting he'd been through this evaluation before. Little of column A, little of column B, O'Neill said with a slight smile. You're clearly dangerous. But so are we, and the universe is full of things that want to eat Earth for breakfast. The question is whether you're going to be a problem or whether we can work together until we figure out how to send you home. Geralt was silent for several heartbeats, his enhanced senses clearly processing everything. Heartbeats, micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in posture that revealed intent. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the pragmatism of a man who'd learned survival required adaptation. I hunt monsters. You're telling me parasitic creatures have enslaved humans and claimed divinity. That sounds like exactly the kind of monster I've spent my life killing. His amber eyes met Hammond's directly. I don't know how to get home. I don't even know if my world still exists or if that portal collapsed permanently. Until I find answers, I might as well make myself useful. Just like that? O'Neill's skepticism was evident. No demands, no conditions? I work for coin in my world. Usually from people who have no choice but to hire a mutant they despise. Something cold flickered across Geralt's expression. At least here, you're honest about evaluating whether I'm useful. And these false gods you describe, they sound like the kind of monsters that need killing more than most. Hammond exchanged glances with his team. Carter looked fascinated, Daniel excited, TLC respectfully neutral, and O'Neill appropriately suspicious. It was the colonel who voiced what they were all thinking. General, we could use someone with his skill set. The Tok'ra are being cagey about intelligence, the Jaffa rebellion is still fragile, and Apophis has been probing our defenses monthly. If this guy can sense Goa'uld symbiotes and has combat training that let him survive a century of monster hunting. O'Neill shrugged. Worth a field test. A supervised field test. Hammond emphasized, his command voice making clear this wasn't negotiable. Mr. Geralt, you'll be assigned temporary quarters under guard. Dr. Fraser will continue medical observation. Major Carter will help you understand the technology you'll be working with. And if you prove trustworthy, we may include you on an off-world mission to evaluate your capabilities in the field. Geralt nodded once, the gesture carrying a swordsman's economy of movement. Understood. Though I'll need my weapons returned. And the potions, I can't make more without ingredients from my world, but what I have may be necessary if your false gods are as dangerous as you claim. We'll discuss weapons when you've earned trust. Hammond replied firmly. For now, consider yourself a guest of the United States Air Force. A monitored, heavily restricted guest. Story of my life. Geralt muttered, his dry humor so understated it almost passed unnoticed. As the guards prepared to escort him to temporary quarters, TLC stepped forward slightly. Geralt of Rivia. You hunt monsters in your world. Here, the monsters command armies and wield technology that can destroy planets. Be certain you understand what you face before committing to this hunt. Geralt met the Jaffa's gaze with the calm of someone who'd stared down worse things than alien parasites. I've fought creatures that could level villages, spirits that fed on fear, and curses that rewrote reality. If your false gods bleed, they can die. That's all I need to know. TLC's expression might have held the faintest suggestion of approval. Indeed. Geralt's temporary quarters were less cell and more minimum security observation room, 12 by 15 feet, concrete walls, a narrow bed bolted to the floor, and security cameras in 3 corners that didn't pretend to be hidden. He'd been imprisoned in worse. At least this facility had running water and guards who hadn't tried to beat him yet. He sat on the bed's edge, eyes closed, focusing on the sensory input his mutations provided. 23 heartbeats within audible range, moving through corridors and patterns suggesting shift changes and patrol routes. Electrical hum from lighting and ventilation systems. The faint residual ozone smell from that impossible portal, the Stargate, still clinging to his clothes. And underneath it all, something else. A low-frequency vibration his medallion had been detecting since arrival, coming from somewhere deeper in this mountain facility. The door's magnetic lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Geralt's eyes opened, pupils contracting as Major Samantha Carter entered carrying a tray of food and what looked like technical equipment. 2 guards remained in the hallway, weapons ready but not raised. "I thought you might be hungry," Carter said, setting the tray on the small table. "Dr. Fraser cleared standard rations for you, though she wasn't sure how your metabolism would handle military food. If you need something specific..." "I've eaten worse." Geralt studied the meal, some kind of meat, vegetables, bread. Adequate. His enhanced metabolism burned through food faster than normal humans, but years of irregular eating during hunts had taught his body to function on whatever was available. "You're here for more than food delivery." Carter smiled slightly, pulling up the room's single chair and setting her tablet on the table beside the tray. "Guilty. I have questions. A lot of questions." She hesitated, then seemed to decide directness was appropriate. "In my field, astrophysics, gate technology, we deal with observable phenomena. Wormhole physics, quantum mechanics, energy-matter conversion. But you keep mentioning magic. Real, functional magic that creates portals between dimensions and enhances human capabilities through..." She gestured at him. "Alchemical mutagens and magical rituals. I need to understand how that's possible." Geralt took a bite of the meat, chewing slowly while considering his response. Most people who asked about magic wanted either to exploit it or condemn it. Carter's curiosity seemed genuine, scientific rather than fearful. "In my world, magic is a force that exists alongside natural laws. Some people are born with the ability to manipulate it, drawing power from what we call chaos and shaping it through will and knowledge. Mages study for decades to master even basic spells. But it's energy manipulation," Carter said, her mind clearly racing. "If magic exists as a measurable force in your universe, then it follows physical principles we just don't understand yet. Clarke's third law: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What if magic in your world is just a different expression of the same quantum forces that power our Stargate? The mages would hate that explanation," Geralt said with something approaching amusement. "They prefer mystery and exclusivity. But I've never cared much for theory. I use what works." He raised his right hand, fingers positioning in a gesture that felt instinctive despite the universe's changed rules. "The signs combat magic witchers learn. They're simple compared to true sorcery. Kinetic force, fire projection, protective barriers. We can cast them quickly because they're hardwired into our mutations." He pushed will and intention into the familiar pattern. In his world, the sign would have manifested immediately. A telekinetic blast of force strong enough to stagger an armored opponent. Here, the energy gathered sluggishly, fighting against universal constants that felt subtly wrong. His hand began to glow with faint amber light, building toward critical threshold, and then... nothing. The energy dissipated like smoke, leaving only a faint tingle in his fingers. Interesting. Carter had pulled out some kind of handheld device, its display showing energy readings. "I detected a bioelectric surge, but it collapsed before reaching manifestation." "Your body generated the charge, but it couldn't find proper outlet." Her eyes gleamed with the excitement of a scientist encountering unprecedented data. It's like you're trying to plug a European electrical device into an American outlet. The power's there, but the connection protocols don't match. Geralt flexed his fingers, frustration carefully controlled. The signs had been reliable tools for over 80 years. Being without them was like losing a sword mid-fight. Can it be fixed? Maybe. Carter's tablet displayed energy wavelength comparisons. The Goa'uld used something called a ribbon device, a karakesh, that channels the host's bioelectric energy through Naquata crystals to create telekinetic and offensive capabilities. It's similar to what you're attempting, but it requires the Goa'uld's Naquata-laden blood to function properly. She looked up, speculation clear in her expression. Your mutations produce unusual compounds in your bloodstream. If we could understand the energy conversion process, we might be able to help you adapt your science to this universe's physical laws. In exchange for studying me. Geralt's tone held no judgment, just recognition of the transaction. Information for information. Assistance for cooperation. That's more cynical than I'd put it, but not inaccurate. Carter met his gaze directly. Look, I get it. You're enhanced in ways that make you valuable to multiple parties, some of whom won't care about ethics or consent. The NID, a civilian intelligence organization that sometimes forgets the moral oversight part of their job, would love to get their hands on someone like you. But General Hammond runs a tight ship. You're under SGC jurisdiction, which means you're protected by military protocols and, frankly, by people who've seen too many allies get exploited. Geralt studied her for a long moment, his Witcher senses reading micro-expressions and heartbeat. Truth, mostly. She believed what she said, even if the reality of military politics might be more complicated. I've learned to trust actions over promises. Show me you're different from the nobles and mages who treated Witchers as disposable tools, and I'll cooperate with your research. Carter nodded slowly. Fair enough. She pulled up new data on her tablet. Then let's start with something practical. Your medallion, the one that vibrates when you're near magic in your world. It's been reacting since you arrived, hasn't it? Geralt's hand moved unconsciously to the silver wolf's head resting against his chest. Constantly. Low-level hum, like standing near a portal between worlds. Gets stronger in certain directions. He gestured toward the room's north wall. Something in this facility is setting it off. Something powerful. The Stargate. Carter's excitement was palpable. Or more specifically, the Naquata in the gate and the energy field it generates when active. Naquata is a heavy mineral with unique properties. It's superconductive and can store massive amounts of energy. The Goa'uld use it in all their technology, and the Stargates themselves are made from it. If your medallion detects magical energy in your world, it might be reacting to the quantum fluctuations Naquata creates. Meaning I can sense your Goa'uld's technology. And the parasites themselves. Geralt filed that information away with the tactical calculation of someone who'd learned to exploit every advantage. Useful. Very. Carter stood, pacing with the restless energy of someone assembling a complex puzzle. The Tok'ra, symbiote resistance fighters who oppose the Goa'uld, they have operatives who can detect Goa'uld presence through Naquata sensitivity. But it's not foolproof, and it requires close proximity. If you can sense symbiotes at range, even through hosts. She trailed off, implications clearly unfolding in her mind. The door opened again, this time admitting Colonel O'Neill with Dr. Jackson trailing behind, nose buried in an ancient-looking book. O'Neill carried Geralt's silver sword, examining the blade with professional appreciation. Carter, you're supposed to be analyzing gate malfunctions, not having coffee talks with our guests. O'Neill's tone suggested he wasn't actually annoyed. He set the sword on the table with careful respect. Nice weapon. Silver, single-edged, made for cutting rather than thrusting. Not standard medieval European style. More like a saber mixed with something I can't identify. It's for monsters, Geralt said quietly. Silver disrupts certain creatures' regeneration, cuts through magical protections. Steel for humans, silver for everything else. Words to live by. O'Neill pulled out the steel sword next, testing its balance with the ease of someone who'd trained with blades. General Hammond authorized returning these. Conditional trust and all that. Don't make us regret it. Geralt accepted both swords, checking them for damage or tampering before securing them across his back in their familiar weight. Having the weapons returned felt like regaining a limb, not complete functionality without his full signs, but better than being unarmed. Appreciated. Daniel finally looked up from his book, eyes bright with discovery. I found something. The conjunction of spheres you mentioned, I cross-referenced it with legends from dozens of cultures, and there's a pattern. Stories about times when the barriers between worlds grew thin, when creatures from other dimensions spilled through portals. Most mythology treats these as isolated supernatural events, but what if they're describing actual cosmological phenomena? He flipped pages covered in ancient text and his own annotations. The ancients, the race that built the Stargates, they achieved technology so advanced it's indistinguishable from magic. They could manipulate space-time, create artificial wormholes, even ascend to higher planes of existence. If they encountered dimensional barriers weakening, they might have documented it. You think my world intersected with your gate network during one of these conjunctions? Geralt's tone was skeptical but interested. More like your magical portal punched through at the exact moment a wormhole was forming, and you got caught in the overlap. Daniel's enthusiasm was infectious. The odds are astronomical, but the universe specializes in improbable intersections. The question is whether it's repeatable or if you're stuck here permanently. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, though the ventilation hadn't changed. Geralt had been avoiding that particular calculation. Stuck. Potentially forever. Cut off from his world, from the path, from Ciri and Yennefer and the few people who tolerated a mutant's company. The thought settled in his chest like a lead weight. O'Neill, demonstrating surprising perceptiveness, cleared his throat. Look, we've all been displaced at one point or another. Different planets, time loops, alternate realities. The universe has a sick sense of humor. But we also have the most advanced dimensional technology in the galaxy. If there's a way home, we'll find it. Eventually. Probably. In the meantime, Carter added gently, you're not without purpose. The Goa'uld War isn't going to win itself, and someone with your abilities could save lives. Earth's lives, and the lives of everyone enslaved by the system lords. Geralt stood, the movement bringing him to his full height, not towering, but dangerous in the way a blade was dangerous. He faced the three members of SG-1 with the assessment of someone deciding whether to trust people who hadn't earned it yet. I'll help. But I need to see what I'm fighting. Your false gods, their technology, the scope of their threat. I've hunted monsters my entire life, but I need to understand these ones before I can kill them. O'Neill grinned slightly, the expression not entirely friendly. Funny you should mention that. General Hammond wants to run a field evaluation. Simple mission, P3X729, routine survey of ancient ruins. Should be quiet. But we're in the middle of a war, so should be and will be our different things. When? Geralt asked. Tomorrow. 0800 hours. O'Neill's casual tone didn't hide the evaluation happening behind his eyes. You'll come as an observer with restricted combat authorization. We'll see how you handle gate travel, alien environments, and whether you can follow orders. Think of it as a job interview with the possibility of Jaffa trying to kill us. I've had worse job interviews. Geralt's dry humor emerged again, understated and easy to miss. Teal'c's voice came from the doorway, the Jaffa having entered silently. The Goa'uld will take notice of a human with abilities beyond the standard slaves they have encountered. Apophis in particular seeks power in all its forms. You will become a target, Geralt of Rivia. Good, Geralt replied, amber eyes reflecting the room's harsh light. Monsters always reveal themselves when hunting. Makes them easier to kill. Teal'c inclined his head fractionally. Indeed. The gate room at 0745 hours hummed with pre-mission efficiency. Geralt stood near the base of the ramp, watching SG-1 conduct final equipment checks with the practiced coordination of a team that had faced death together enough times to make preparation ritual. His own gear felt simultaneously familiar and inadequate. Swords across his back, 3 remaining potions secured in leather pouches, but no bombs, no oils for blade coating, and signs that flickered uselessly when he tried to manifest them. Carter adjusted the strange weapon they'd given him, AP-90, compact and lighter than any crossbow, firing bullets at rates that made traditional firearms look primitive. She'd spent an hour teaching him its operation, safety protocols, and the disturbing reality that ammunition was functionally unlimited compared to the dozen bolts a crossbow might carry. Remember, short, controlled bursts. The recoil is manageable, but you'll burn through a magazine in seconds if you hold the trigger. Understood. Geralt checked the weapon's weight distribution, muscle memory adapting to unfamiliar balance. He'd used crossbows, bombs, and signs for decades. Adding another tool wasn't difficult, just different. O'Neill appeared beside him, adjusting his own tactical vest with the ease of someone who'd worn combat gear more often than civilian clothes. Quick brief before we go through. P3X729 is uninhabited, was a minor Goa'uld outpost about 300 years ago, abandoned after some system lord pissing match. SGC long-range sensors detected what might be ancient technology in the ruins. We gate in, Daniel does his archaeology thing, we determine if there's anything worth retrieving, we gate home. Standard milk run. In my experience, standard is when things go wrong. Gerald's tone was flat observation, not pessimism. See, you're learning already? O'Neill's grin was brief. Rules are simple. Stay with the team, follow orders, don't shoot unless we're shooting, and if I say run for the gate, you run. The DHD, dial home device, is how we get back. Big pedestal with symbols, pretty intuitive. Carter will show you basic operation in case we get separated, which we won't, but paranoia keeps people alive. Daniel approached, adjusting glasses and carrying enough scanning equipment to outfit a small research expedition. Geralt, the ruins we're investigating predate the Goa'uld occupation by thousands of years. If the ancients built anything there, it could be significant. Your medallion, if it reacts to ancient technology the way it reacts to the Stargate, you might be able to detect devices our sensors miss. TLC moved to join them, staff weapons secured across his broad back, expression carrying the calm focus of a warrior entering combat. The planet's Stargate is located in open terrain. The ruins lie approximately 2 kilometers north. Standard Jaffa patrol doctrine would position scouts in elevated positions and heavy weapons near the gate. If Apophis has renewed interest in this world, we will encounter resistance. Cheerful. Geralt muttered, though his senses were already sharpening, adrenaline beginning its slow build, heart rate controlled through decades of pre-hunt discipline. His medallion rested against his chest, quiescent but ready. Whatever waited on the other side of that impossible portal, he'd face it the way he'd faced every hunt. Assess, adapt, survive? General Hammond's voice crackled through the intercom from the control room above. SG-1, you have a go. Dial the gate. Carter moved to the DHD built into the control console, not the portable device used on other worlds, but Earth's jury-rigged system for operating the Stargate from their own facility. She entered coordinates with practiced precision, and the gate responded. 7 chevrons locked in sequence, each engaging with that distinctive mechanical thunder. The event horizon exploded outward in its violent whoosh before settling into the rippling blue surface that defied every instinct about how liquids should behave. Geralt's medallion vibrated sharply against his sternum, responding to the massive energy displacement. His pupils contracted, cat-like eyes adjusting to the wormhole's unnatural luminescence. That never gets less strange. Wait until you go through it. O'Neill gestured toward the active Stargate. Ladies first. Or in this case, TLC first, because he's got the biggest gun. The Jaffa moved up the ramp without hesitation, stepping into the event horizon and vanishing instantly. Not through it like walking through a door, but consumed by it, matter converted to energy and transmitted across light years in the span of a heartbeat. Carter followed, then Daniel, their forms disappearing into that blue shimmer with the confidence of people who'd done this hundreds of times. O'Neill paused beside Geralt at the ramp's base. Full disclosure, gate travel feels like being torn apart and reassembled at atomic level. Because that's literally what happens. First time is disorienting. Try not to vomit on the other side. Daniel did that once, and we still give him shit about it. Comforting. Geralt started up the ramp, each step bringing him closer to that rippling surface. His Witcher training screamed warnings about walking into obvious magical portals, but the alternative was staying in this mountain with its guards and cameras and the slow suffocation of confinement. He'd chosen the hunt. Time to commit. The event horizon felt cold against his outstretched hand, then he was through, and Colonel O'Neill's description proved inadequate. His body disintegrated into component atoms, consciousness maintaining horrifying awareness throughout the process as the wormhole encoded his pattern and transmitted it through compressed space-time. The journey lasted both an eternity and no time at all, quantum superposition making mockery of human perception. Then reality reasserted itself with violent certainty. Geralt materialized on a stone platform under alien sky, stumbling slightly as his inner ear recalibrated to different gravity and his enhanced senses tried processing input from a world that had never known Earth's sun. He managed not to fall, pride and Witcher balance keeping him upright, though his stomach lurched with the kind of nausea usually reserved for drinking particularly vile potions. Not bad, Carter said, lowering her P90 after confirming the area was clear. You stayed on your feet. Daniel face-planted his first time. I did not face-plant. Daniel protested from where he was already examining the DHD. I stumbled gracefully. The planet struck Geralt with its alienness. The sky was wrong. Too purple, with two small moons visible despite what felt like midday. The air tasted of copper and something organic he couldn't identify, temperature several degrees warmer than Earth's autumn. Red-orange vegetation covered rolling hills in the distance, nothing like the forests of the continent. And the ruins Daniel had mentioned rose against the horizon like broken teeth. Massive stone structures weathered by millennia, architecture suggesting builders who'd understood principles Earth was still discovering. His medallion hummed, not the sharp vibration of the Stargate, but a steady pulse indicating something powerful nearby. Ancient technology, if Carter's theory held. O'Neill materialized behind him, the colonel taking in their surroundings with tactical assessment before nodding satisfaction. Clear, LZ. No welcoming party. I'm choosing to view this as good luck rather than suspicious quiet. He pulled out a device that beeped softly. Life signs detector shows nothing within 500 meters. Let's move to the ruins, do the science thing, and get home in time for lunch. They moved in standard formation, TLC on point, O'Neill and Carter on flanks, Daniel in the middle with his equipment, and Geralt positioned between Carter and Daniel where they could monitor him. Professional soldiers adapted to alien warfare, every movement economical and purposeful. Geralt fell into the rhythm easily enough, though his instincts kept screaming that the silent ruins and empty hills were exactly where ambushes happened. The terrain rose gradually, forcing them uphill through vegetation that crunched under boots like dried bone. Geralt's enhanced hearing caught sounds the others missed, distant whine through hollow structures, small creatures moving through underbrush, and something else. Something that made his medallion's hum intensify. Contact, he said quietly, the word stopping SG-1 instantly. O'Neill raised a fist, team freezing in place. Where? Geralt closed his eyes, filtering sensory input the way he'd learned hunting drowners in murky swamps and griffins in mountain passes. The medallion pulled north-northeast, toward the ruins, but the sound came from higher ground east. Rhythmic. Mechanical almost. East Ridge. Multiple sources. Moving in formation. Carter checked her scanner, frowning. I'm not getting anything on life signs. No Naquata signatures either. Trust the Witcher, Tilsey said quietly, staff weapon already unslung and charged. If his senses detect threats ours miss, we would be foolish to doubt. They waited, weapons trained on the eastern ridge. 30 seconds. 60. Then movement crested the hill, not Jaffa, but something else. Mechanical constructs approximately human-sized, moving with insectoid precision. Their bodies were composed of interlocking metallic blocks that shifted and reconfigured as they moved, surfaces reflecting sunlight in ways that hurt to watch directly. 6 of them, advancing in coordinated pattern toward the ruins. "Oh crap," O'Neill breathed. "Carter, please tell me those aren't what I think they are." Carter's face had gone pale. "Replicators. Multiple units. Asgard design, which means we are extremely screwed," O'Neill finished. "Daniel, dial the gate. Everyone else, fighting retreat. Do not let those things touch you." But the replicators had detected them. The lead unit's blocks reconfigured, forming what looked disturbingly like a weapon. Energy crackled between metallic segments, building charge with visible ionization. Geralt's combat instincts screamed. He pushed Will into the Ard sign pattern, desperate for even limited function. The energy gathered in his palm, fighting this universe's physical laws, and he threw everything he had into manifesting the telekinetic blast. The sign erupted at perhaps 30% normal strength, not the devastating force that could shatter doors, but enough. An invisible wave of kinetic energy struck the lead replicator mid-charge, disrupting its weapon formation and sending it tumbling backward into 2 others. The metallic blocks scattered, then immediately began reassembling. "Run!" O'Neill's shout cut through Geralt's surprise at the sign actually working. "Now!" They ran. Downhill, toward the Stargate, P-90s chattering as SG-1 laid suppressing fire. The bullet struck replicator blocks with metallic pings, doing minimal damage as the constructs simply rearranged around the impacts. TLC's staff weapon proved more effective. The energy blasts had enough power to vaporize individual blocks, but the replicators adapted, spreading formation to minimize losses. Geralt ran alongside them, his enhanced speed letting him keep pace while reloading the P-90 with fumbling fingers. The Stargate rose ahead, an anchor point in alien landscape, with Daniel already punching symbols on the DHD. The chevrons began locking 1, 2, 3, while death machines closed from behind with terrible inevitability. Carter spun, firing control bursts. "Daniel, anytime now! Ancient security protocols!" Daniel's voice was strained. "The DHD is requesting authorization codes." 4 chevrons locked. 5. The replicators were 50 meters back and closing. TLC took a knee, staff weapon tracking targets with Jaffa precision, each shot buying seconds. O'Neill grabbed something from his vest, a grenade, pulled the pin and threw it with Special Forces accuracy. The explosion caught 2 replicators mid-stride, scattering blocks across red vegetation. But the blocks were already crawling toward each other, reassembling with horror movie persistence. 6 chevrons locked. Geralt's medallion screamed against his chest, vibrating so hard it felt like it might tear through skin. Not from the replicators, from something else. Something in the ruins behind them, waking up in response to conflict. Ancient technology responding to threat protocols millennia old. The 7th chevron locked with its distinctive clang. The event horizon exploded into being, beautiful blue salvation shimmering on the DHD platform. "Go, go, go!" O'Neill pushed Daniel through first, the archaeologist vanishing into the wormhole with his equipment. Carter followed, then TLC laid one final staff blast before diving through. Geralt and O'Neill were last, backing toward the gate while firing. The replicators surged forward, blocks reconfiguring into something worse. Bladed appendages meant for melee, moving with mechanical precision that no living thing could match. "Your world have killer robots?" O'Neill asked between bursts. "Golems. Constructs. Nothing this fast." Geralt's P-90 clicked empty. No time to reload. He drew his steel sword, the familiar weight steadying nerves, and bought 3 seconds with a blast of ard that scattered the lead replicators' blocks like dice. Through. Now. O'Neill was already moving backward up the gate ramp. Geralt followed, boots hitting stone, and together they plunged into the event horizon. The wormhole took them, tearing atoms across light years, and the last thing Geralt's enhanced senses registered before dematerialization was his medallion's shriek reaching crescendo, not from the replicators pursuing them, but from something vast in those ruins finally awakening after millennia of sleep. They materialized in the SGC gate room in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Alarms were already blaring, the iris slamming shut 3 micrometers from the event horizon just as something massive struck it from the other side. The titanium barrier held, but the impact sent vibrations through the entire facility. "Close the iris!" Hammond's voice thundered from the control room. "Shut down the gate!" The wormhole collapsed, leaving only echoes and the team sprawled on the ramp, breathing hard. Geralt's medallion finally went silent, leaving only the memory of that massive presence reaching toward them through dimensional barrier. O'Neill sat up slowly, checking his team with practiced efficiency before fixing Geralt with a look. "So, standard milk run. How'd you like your first mission?" Geralt, still flat on his back and processing what just happened, managed 2 words. "Hate. Portals." The debriefing room felt smaller than its actual dimensions suggested, walls closing in with the weight of questions nobody could answer satisfactorily. Geralt sat at the conference table nursing coffee that tasted like someone had weaponized bitterness, his enhanced metabolism already filtering out the caffeine before it could provide useful stimulation. Across from him, SG-1 looked equally exhausted, though their faces carried the grim familiarity of people who'd survived impossible situations often enough to make survival routine. General Hammond stood at the head of the table, hands clasped behind his back in parade rest, expression carved from granite. "Let me make certain I understand. You dialed P3X729 for a routine survey mission. You encountered replicators. Asgard-designed technological threats that shouldn't exist in that sector of the galaxy. And when you retreated through the gate, something substantially larger attempted to follow you through before the iris closed. That about covers it, sir." O'Neill's tone carried the careful neutrality of someone reporting disasters frequently enough to develop a template. The replicators were unexpected. Last intel from Thor suggested they'd been contained to designated sectors. Finding them on a backwater planet with ancient ruins is concerning. Concerning. Hammond repeated, the word heavy with understatement. Major Carter, analysis. Carter pulled up holographic displays from her tablet, projecting technical schematics into the air above the table. The replicators we encountered were standard Asgard variants, self-replicating machines composed of Chiron-based blocks. Each block is essentially a miniature computer and construction unit. They consume technology, learn from it, and adapt. Conventional weapons are minimally effective because they simply reconfigure around damage. She highlighted footage from their helmet cameras showing the replicators reassembling after TLCS staff weapon blasts. What's unusual is their presence on P3X729. That planet was surveyed 6 months ago with no replicator signatures detected. They could have arrived recently, Daniel suggested, cleaning his glasses with nervous energy. The ruins contain ancient technology. We confirmed that much before the contact. Replicators seek out advanced technology to consume and analyze. If something in those ruins activated or sent out a signal, it might have drawn them from nearby space. Geralt set down his coffee, amber eyes fixed on the holographic replicators with the focus of a hunter identifying prey. Your mechanical monsters weren't the primary threat. Something else was in those ruins. Something massive that woke up when we engaged the replicators. My medallion reacted to it stronger than it reacts to your Stargate. All eyes turned to him. Hammond's expression shifted from command authority to genuine interest. Explain. My medallion vibrates near magic. Or in this universe, near your Naquata and ancient technology. Geralt pulled the silver wolf's head from beneath his shirt, the metal still faintly warm from residual energy exposure. Standard vibration near your gate, stronger near active Goa'uld technology. But in those ruins, when the fighting started, it felt like standing next to a lightning storm. Whatever's buried there isn't dormant equipment. It's active, aware, and it tried to reach through your portal when we escaped. TLC leaned forward slightly, dark eyes reflecting the seriousness of someone who'd fought too many wars to dismiss intuition. Ancient defensive systems often remain operational for millennia. If the structure Geralt detected was designed to protect ancient facilities from threats, the replicator presence may have triggered automated response protocols. Or, Carter added, her scientist's mind assembling darker possibilities. The replicators weren't there randomly. They were trying to access whatever Geralt sensed. Ancient technology represents the most advanced systems in the known galaxy. If replicators gained access to ancient defensive weapons or power generation. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Hammond absorbed this with the calm of a career officer who'd learned that the worst-case scenarios were usually optimistic. Recommendations? We can't leave ancient technology for replicators to harvest, Daniel said immediately. Whatever's in those ruins could be a weapon, a power source, or information the ancients considered important enough to protect. If it falls into replicator control, or worse, if they transmit the data to other units, we'll have an exponentially larger problem. So we go back, O'Neill said flatly. Bigger team, heavier weapons, probably some of those Asgard disruption devices we borrowed from Thor. We secure the ruins, extract or destroy whatever ancient tech is there, and make sure the replicators don't get a souvenir. Unacceptable risk. Hammond countered. We barely extracted one team. Sending more personnel into confirmed replicator presence without proper intelligence is how we lose teams. Then we get intelligence. Carter's fingers flew across her tablet. We send a MALP, Mobile Analytic Laboratory probe. Remote sensors, cameras, radiation detection. We can dial P3X729, send the MALP through, and assess the situation without risking personnel. If the replicators have fortified the area or if that ancient system has gone active, we'll know before committing to ground operations. Hammond considered this, strategy calculations visible in his weathered features. Do it. Schedule MALP deployment for 1,400 hours. I want full sensor packages and continuous transmission. If anything comes through that gate that isn't our probe, the iris stays closed. His gaze swept across SG-1, lingering on Geralt. In the meantime, I want to understand why Mr. Geralt's medieval magic detector is outperforming our multi-million-dollar sensor arrays. I'd like to run some tests, Carter said, already pulling up technical specifications. If Geralt's medallion can detect ancient technology our equipment misses, it suggests sensitivity to energy signatures or quantum states we haven't calibrated for. With his permission, I'd like to expose the medallion to various ancient devices in our possession and map its response patterns. Geralt's hand moved instinctively to the silver wolf's head, protective of one of the few links to his world. But Carter's request was reasonable, and refusing cooperation would erode the fragile trust he'd been building. Fine. But I stay with it. This medallion has kept me alive for 80 years. I'm not letting it out of my sight. Agreed. Carter's expression held understanding. She'd clearly dealt with enough sentimentally valuable equipment to recognize the difference between paranoia and prudence. We'll work in Lab 3. I've got several ancient artifacts there, including a control crystal from a repository device and some technological samples from various planets. We'll start with passive observation and work up to active systems. The debriefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering tactical details, equipment performance, and the disturbing efficiency with which replicators had adapted to their weapons. TLC provided analysis of replicator combat doctrine based on Jaffa intelligence. Daniel speculated about which ancient facility might have been established on P3X729, and what its strategic purpose could have been. O'Neill mostly made sarcastic observations about killer robots and his deep philosophical opposition to things that reassembled after being shot. When Hammond finally dismissed them, Geralt followed Carter through SGC's labyrinthine corridors toward the laboratory levels. The base felt more familiar now. 3 days of confinement and observation had mapped its rhythms, guard rotations, and the underlying tension of people fighting a war they couldn't afford to lose. Soldiers nodded respectfully to Carter as they passed, though their eyes tracked Geralt with the wariness reserved for unknowns. Lab 3 was smaller than he'd expected, walls lined with equipment whose purpose he could only guess at. Glass cases contained various crystalline structures, metallic fragments, and devices that hummed with the same energy signature his medallion detected from the Stargate. Carter moved through the space with practiced familiarity, pulling on latex gloves and activating scanning equipment that beat to life. "Let's start simple," she said, gesturing to a cushioned chair surrounded by sensor arrays. "Sit there, keep your medallion exposed, and I'll introduce various ancient artifacts at increasing distances. We'll measure your medallion's vibration frequency and amplitude while correlating it with known energy signatures from each device." Geralt settled into the chair, pulling the medallion out where sensors could observe it. The silver wolf's head rested against his palm, metal warm and reassuringly solid. Carter approached with a small crystal, no larger than her thumb, glowing with faint internal luminescence. "This is a control crystal from an ancient data repository," she explained, holding it at arm's length. "It stores information, possibly entire libraries of knowledge, in crystalline matrix structure. When interfaced with proper ancient technology, it can download data directly into a compatible mind." Her expression darkened slightly. "We've seen what happens when incompatible minds try to access ancient knowledge. It's not pretty." The medallion began vibrating before Carter closed half the distance. Low frequency, steady pulse, similar to what Geralt felt near the Stargate but more focused. "It's responding. Feels like standing near a portal, but concentrated." Carter checked her instruments, excitement building in her voice. "The crystal is emitting zero-point energy fluctuations, quantum vacuum energy that ancient technology taps for power. Your medallion is detecting those fluctuations at wavelengths our standard sensors barely register. It's like you've got a biological quantum detector." She moved the crystal closer. The vibration intensified, not painful but insistent, setting his teeth slightly on edge. When she brought it within 6 inches of the medallion, the silver wolf's head began to glow, faint amber light emanating from the metal itself, similar to the energy that built when he attempted science. Fascinating. Carter was rapidly documenting observations. The medallion isn't just detecting energy. It's resonating with it. The silver composition might be acting as a quantum antenna, amplified by whatever enchantment process created it. She set the crystal aside carefully. "In your world, how are these medallions made?" "Mage-crafted," Geralt replied, watching the glow fade as the crystal moved away. "Silver melted and shaped during specific lunar phases, enchanted with spells attuned to detect magical emanations. Every witcher receives one during training. They warn us when monsters or curses are near. The stronger the supernatural presence, the stronger the vibration. Magic as energy manipulation." Carter mused, pulling out another artifact, this one a curved piece of metal etched with symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Then your mages understood principles we're still discovering. Quantum entanglement, zero-point energy, dimensional resonance. They just approached it through ritual and will instead of mathematics and machinery." The new artifact made the medallion vibrate differently, sharper, more aggressive, like the warning of immediate danger rather than ambient magic. Geralt's hand moved instinctively toward his sword hilt. "That one's dangerous. Very perceptive." Carter held the artifact carefully, respect evident in her handling. "This is a fragment from an ancient weapon platform. When complete, it could generate energy pulses capable of destroying ships in orbit. We've kept it inactive since recovery, but residual charge remains in the crystalline matrix." She brought it closer, watching the medallion's reaction. "Your instincts are reading threat level, not just energy presence. That's tactically invaluable." They continued through her collection, Data storage crystals, power conduits, fragments of control interfaces, each producing distinct responses in the medallion's vibration. Geralt learned to differentiate patterns. Steady pulse for dormant systems, rapid flutter for active technology, sharp staccato for weapons or defensive systems. By the time Carter exhausted her immediate inventory, he developed a rudimentary understanding of how ancient technology felt through his medallion's perception. "One more test," Carter said, pulling out a sealed container with biohazard markings. "This is more sensitive. I need your verbal consent before proceeding." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "Goa'uld symbiote. Dead specimen, preserved for study." Carter's expression was serious. "You sense TLCS symbiote on site. I want to confirm whether your medallion reacts to Goa'uld physiology the same way it reacts to their technology. If you can detect symbiotes reliably, it could save lives during infiltration missions or when identifying compromised personnel." The implications were clear. Geralt had spent 80 years hunting creatures that hid among humans. Doppelgangers, vampires, demons wearing flesh. Adding parasitic snakes to that list was just another variation on familiar horror. "Do it." Carter opened the container. The symbiote inside was perhaps a foot long, serpentine body pale in preservation fluid, eyeless head designed for burrowing into spinal columns. Even dead, it carried wrongness that transcended visual assessment. The medallion reacted violently. Not vibration, convulsion. The silver wolf's head jerked against Geralt's chest hard enough to bruise, pulling toward the symbiote with magnetic intensity while simultaneously trying to repel from it. The conflicting forces made his sternum ache. An amber light flared bright enough to cast shadows across the lab. "Fascinating," Carter breathed, instruments recording data frantically. "The medallion is detecting the Naquata in the symbiote's bloodstream, but also something else. Bioelectric signatures, neural patterns, maybe even the genetic memory Goa'uld inherit from their queens. You're not just sensing the symbiote, you're sensing its nature as parasitic intelligence designed to overwhelm host consciousness." Geralt forced words through gritted teeth. "It's reading as enemy. Predator. Something that wears victims like clothing." The wrongness intensified, his Witcher mutations recognizing threat on instinctive level. "Close it." Carter sealed the container immediately. The medallion's reaction diminished but didn't entirely cease, residual energy taking several seconds to dissipate. Geralt's breathing was controlled but elevated, heart rate spiking in ways it hadn't during the replicator engagement. The symbiote was dead, preserved, completely harmless. But his body knew monsters when it encountered them, and that thing was monster to its core. "I'm sorry," Carter said genuinely. "I didn't anticipate the reaction would be that severe." "But the data." She showed him the readouts, energy spikes, quantum fluctuations, bioelectric patterns that painted a picture of detection capability far beyond standard equipment. "Geralt, you can identify Goa'uld hosts at range with essentially perfect accuracy. Do you understand what that means for infiltration detection? For protecting high-value targets? For identifying trust operatives or Goa'uld spies before they compromise missions?" Geralt understood. It meant his value had just increased exponentially. It meant people would want to exploit this capability, study it, possibly replicate it. It meant he'd become a strategic asset in a war that wasn't his, bound by usefulness rather than choice. It also meant he could save people. Could identify parasites before they spread. Could hunt the monsters that claimed godhood and enslaved populations. "The system lords will learn about this eventually," he said quietly, meeting Carter's eyes. "When they do, they'll want me dead or converted. Probably both." "Probably," Carter agreed, not insulting him with false reassurance. "But you won't face them alone. That's what SG-1 is for, watching each other's backs against things that want us dead or worse." She deactivated the scanning equipment, expression shifting from scientist to soldier. "You're one of us now, Geralt. Whether you planned on it or not." The lab door opened. O'Neill leaned in, expression grave. "Carter, Witcher." Conference room. Now, MALP transmission just came back from P3X729, and we've got a problem. They followed him through corridors at quick march, other personnel moving aside with the practiced efficiency of a base on alert status. The conference room's main display showed grainy footage from the MALP, the mobile probe sending real-time video through the open wormhole. The ruins weren't ruins anymore. The ancient structure had transformed. Walls that appeared weathered and broken in their previous visit now stood pristine, energy barriers shimmering between intact columns. And the replicators, dozens of them, possibly hundreds, swarmed across the facility's exterior like metallic insects, their blocks shifting and reconfiguring as they attempted to breach whatever defenses the ancient system had activated. At the structure's center, visible through gaps in the defensive barriers, something massive pulsed with energy that made the MALP's camera distort. Geralt's medallion, still exposed from Carter's tests, began vibrating in resonance with the distant ancient device. Daniel's voice was hushed with academic horror and excitement. That's a weapons platform. Ancient design, possibly predating Atlantis. It's tracking the replicators, but it hasn't fired yet. The defensive protocols must require certain threat threshold criteria before the ancient device fired. Energy lanced from the central structure in a beam that turned 3 replicators into vapor instantly. The remaining units scattered, blocks reconfiguring into defensive formations, but the weapon tracked with mechanical precision. Another pulse. 4 more replicators ceased to exist. Well, O'Neill said into the stunned silence. That's new. Hammond's voice was grim. Major Carter, estimate that weapon's potential range and destructive capacity. Carter's fingers flew across calculations, her face going progressively paler. Sir, if that's a standard ancient orbital defense platform, it could engage targets in high orbit. Possibly beyond. The energy output suggests 0-point module power source, which means effectively unlimited ammunition. And if it's been dormant for millennia, there's no telling what its targeting parameters are or what it considers a threat. So we've got an automated ancient doomsday weapon surrounded by replicators trying to access it. O'Neill summarized. And if either the replicators crack the defenses or the weapon decides we're a threat, everyone in this galaxy has a very bad day. Geralt studied the footage, watching replicators attempt coordinated breaches while the ancient weapon methodically eliminated them with the patience of a machine that had waited thousands of years and could wait thousands more. His medallion's vibration hadn't ceased. If anything, it had strengthened, as if that distant weapon recognized his presence through the MALP's transmission and was evaluating whether he represented friend or foe. We have to go back, he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. That weapon is waking up. Your machines are feeding it targets, training it to identify threats. Eventually it's going to expand its threat assessment. And when it does, it won't care about the difference between replicators and people coming through your Stargate. Hammond's expression suggested he'd reached the same conclusion. Then we'd better figure out how to shut it down before it decides Earth is the next target. The briefing room felt like a pressure cooker as military and scientific minds collided over impossible tactical problems. Geralt sat slightly apart from the main discussion, watching SG-1, several other team commanders, and a collection of specialists argue about how to neutralize an ancient weapons platform without getting vaporized by either the weapon itself or the replicators trying to breach it. We could use the Tok'ra, Colonel Makepeace suggested, the grizzled SG-3 commander leaning forward with aggressive posture. They've got operatives who've dealt with ancient technology before. Maybe some intel on defensive platform protocols. The Tok'ra share information on their timeline, not ours, O'Neill countered. By the time they finish internal debates about whether helping us serves their strategic interests, the replicators will have cracked that facility, or the weapon will have started shooting at passing ships. Daniel spread ancient texts across the table, translations covering margins in his cramped handwriting. According to these fragments from the Atlantis Expeditions database, ancient defensive platforms operated on threat assessment algorithms. They could distinguish between authorized personnel, anyone with the ATA gene, and hostiles. If we could get someone with ancient gene expression close enough to the platform's control interface, we might be able to shut it down or at least modify its targeting parameters. Define close enough, O'Neill said dryly. Because from what I saw, that thing's definition of personal space is orbital bombardment range. Carter pulled up holographic schematics reconstructed from MALP footage and ancient database fragments. The control interface should be centrally located, probably in a shielded chamber beneath the main weapon assembly. Ancient design philosophy prioritized redundancy. Even if we can't access the primary controls, there should be secondary systems, maybe even manual overrides built into the facility's power distribution network. Through hundreds of replicators and an active weapons platform, Makepeace said flatly. With all due respect, Major, that's a suicide mission. Then we make it a calculated risk instead of suicide. Carter's voice carried the determination of someone who'd survived enough impossible situations to believe in controllable odds. We go in heavy, 2 full SG teams for security, engineering specialists, and anyone with ancient gene expression who can interface with the controls. We use Asgard replicator disruptors to clear a path, move fast, access the control chamber, and shut down the platform before it expands threat assessment beyond the immediate facility. Teal'c's deep voice cut through the tactical speculation. The replicators will adapt to disruptor technology within minutes of exposure. The Asgard learned this truth at great cost. We will have limited window before they develop countermeasures and our weapons become ineffective. Then we use that window wisely. O'Neill stood, moving to the holographic display and tracing potential approach vectors. We dial in, establish beachhead at the gate, lay down suppressing fire with disruptors while engineering team sprints for the facility. Carter takes point on the ancient tech because she's got the gene and knows this stuff better than anyone. Daniel goes because we'll probably need someone to read ancient warnings about imminent doom. Teal'c and I provide security because that's what we do. What about the Witcher? Makepeace's question carried skepticism. He did fine on a standard recon mission, but this is specialized combat against technological threats. No offense, but swords aren't going to cut it against replicators. Geralt had been waiting for this. He met Makepeace's challenging stare with the calm of someone who'd endured decades of prejudice from people who needed his skills but despised his existence. My medallion detected that ancient weapon before your equipment registered anything unusual. It can sense replicators. They emit energy signatures similar to magical constructs in my world. And I managed to disrupt their formation with signs during our retreat. Limited effectiveness, but better than nothing. He's right, Carter added. Geralt's capabilities complement our standard approach. He can detect threats our sensors miss. His enhanced combat abilities match or exceed Jaffa-level performance. And if his signs are adapting to this universe's physics, he represents an unpredictable tactical element the replicators won't have algorithms for. Plus he doesn't vaporize when shot. O'Neill added helpfully. Advanced healing, remember? That's tactically useful when fighting things that like to stab people with metallic appendages. Hammond had been silent through most of the debate, absorbing arguments with the patience of command authority that knew the final decision rested with him regardless of consensus. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of sending people into mortal danger while hoping they'd return. We go. SG-1 takes point with Mr. Geralt as specialist consultant. SG-3 and SG-5 provide security perimeter and fallback positions. Major Carter commands the technical team. Rules of engagement. Minimal contact with replicators. Disruptors authorized for crowd control only. Primary objective is accessing that control chamber and shutting down the weapons platform before it achieves full operational status. His eyes swept across every face in the room. If the situation deteriorates beyond recovery parameters, you withdraw immediately. That ancient technology isn't worth losing 3 teams. Clear? A chorus of acknowledgments rippled through the room. Military personnel began filing out, already coordinating equipment loads and tactical preparations. Geralt remained seated as the room emptied, processing the reality that he just volunteered for another mission into alien warfare he barely understood. Daniel approached, carrying one of his ancient texts with visible excitement poorly contained by professional concern. "Geralt, I've been researching defensive platforms in the ancient database. There's a reference to something called a Sentinel, an automated guardian system designed to protect critical facilities during the ancient Wraith War. If P3X729 housed the Sentinel, it would explain both the weapon's capabilities and why it's been dormant until now. Why activate after millennia?" Geralt asked, genuinely curious despite his general skepticism about ancient relics that shot first and asked questions never. Replicators. Daniel's enthusiasm for ancient mysteries briefly overcame situational gravity. The ancients created human-form replicators and Pegasus Galaxy as weapons against the Wraith. The experiment went catastrophically wrong, and the ancients spent considerable effort destroying their creation. If Sentinel platforms were programmed to recognize replicator energy signatures as existential threats. He trailed off, implications clear. Then it woke up because it detected the exact enemy it was built to destroy. Geralt finished. And it won't stop until either the replicators are eliminated or it runs out of targets. Exactly. Which means we might not need to shut it down, we might need to redirect it. If we can modify its targeting parameters to exclude human life signs while maintaining replicator hostility, the Sentinel could be an asset instead of a threat. Carter rejoined them, overhearing Daniel's speculation. That's risky. Ancient AI operates on logic frameworks we barely understand. Modifying targeting protocols without full system access could cause unpredictable behavior, like expanding threat assessment to include anyone carrying Naquata-based technology, which would make every Goa'uld mothership, Tok'ra operative, and Jaffa warrior a legitimate target. Would that be such a terrible thing? Geralt's question was mild, but his amber eyes held predatory calculation. From what you've told me, the Goa'uld are parasites enslaving millions. Using an ancient weapon to eliminate system lords sounds efficient. Morally complicated. Daniel countered immediately. Yes, the Goa'uld are parasites, but they inhabit human hosts who are innocent victims. Killing a Goa'uld means killing the host. We've spent years trying to develop extraction methods, negotiating with the Tok'ra for host-saving protocols. Just eliminating them en masse would mean murdering millions of enslaved humans. The philosophical divide opened like a chasm. Geralt had spent his life making pragmatic decisions, killing monsters that threatened innocence, accepting collateral damage as unavoidable cost of protection. But the moral calculus here was different. These weren't mindless drowners or feral vampires. They were sentient parasites wearing stolen bodies, and destroying them meant destroying the victims they'd claimed. Your war is more complicated than mine, Geralt admitted quietly. In my world, monsters are monsters. You kill them and save who you can. Here, your monsters hide behind innocence, and killing them means becoming the monster yourself. Welcome to the moral nightmare of fighting the Goa'uld, O'Neill said, appearing beside them with tactical vests already equipped. It's why we haven't just glassed every mothership we've encountered. Well, that and the fact they'd glass us back, but mostly the host thing. He clapped Geralt on the shoulder with surprising camaraderie. Don't worry, you'll get used to ethically dubious tactical decisions. Or you'll develop a drinking problem. Possibly both. Reassuring. The next 3 hours blurred into preparation. Geralt received additional equipment, tactical vest modified to accommodate his swords, extra P90 magazines, communications headset that felt claustrophobic against his sensitive ears, and what Carter called an Asgard replicator disruptor. The device resembled a modified pistol, firing directed energy pulses calibrated to disrupt the specific quantum frequencies that allowed replicator blocks to maintain cohesion. It's effective for approximately 8 to 12 minutes before they adapt, Carter explained during weapons training in the SGC's firing range. Aim for center mass. The energy pulse spreads through their block network and causes cascade failure. You'll know it's working when they stop moving and collapse into component pieces. Geralt test fired at a holographic target, the disruptor producing a sound like reality-tearing and a visible distortion wave that made his Witcher senses recoil. How many shots? 24 charge capacity, then it needs a new power cell. Use them wisely. He practiced until muscle memory adapted to the weapon's peculiar recoil and firing characteristics, then returned to armory to check his swords. The silver blade had acquired new respect from SGC personnel after Carter's tests revealed the silver alloy composition included trace elements that resonated with zero-point energy. Whether it would actually harm replicators remained theoretical, but Geralt had learned that sometimes theoretical was all you had when facing the unknown. TLC found him in the armory, the Jaffa's presence announced by the subtle shift in air pressure that came from a warrior's controlled breathing. You prepare thoroughly, Geralt of Rivia. This speaks well of your survival instincts. I've stayed alive by treating every hunt seriously. Geralt sharpened his steel blade with practiced strokes, the familiar rasp of whetstone on metal centering him. Even the ones that should be simple. Wisdom. Tilsi watched the sharpening with appreciation for craftsmanship. I have fought replicators before. They are unlike any enemy you have encountered. They do not tire, do not fear, do not retreat unless tactically advantageous. They exist only to replicate and consume technology. Your enhanced healing will not aid you if they swarm. They will disassemble you faster than your mutations can repair damage. Then I won't let them swarm. Geralt tested the steel blade's edge, satisfied with its killing sharpness. I've fought hive-mind creatures before. Andragas, Neckers, Drowners in large groups. You find the coordinating intelligence, or you eliminate them faster than they can adapt. Same principle. Indeed. TLC's expression held something approaching approval. O'Neill believes you will perform adequately under pressure. I am inclined to agree. You possess the calm of a warrior who has accepted death as inevitable outcome while refusing to surrender to it. That's Witcher training. Geralt sheathed the steel sword, meeting TLC's dark eyes directly. We're taught that death comes for everyone, but we decide whether it comes on our terms or the monsters. I've been making monsters regret trying to kill me for 80 years. Not planning to stop now. The Jaffa's smile was subtle but genuine. You will fit well with SG-1. We specialize in making our enemies regret their tactical decisions. Gate activation was scheduled for 1,600 hours. 3 teams assembled in the gate room, 30 personnel armed with P-90s, staff weapons, replicator disruptors, demolition charges, and enough determination to assault an automated ancient weapons platform surrounded by hostile technological threats. Geralt stood with SG-1, his medallion already humming in anticipation of the Stargate's activation, swords a familiar weight across his back. Hammond's voice crackled through the intercom. SG-1, SG-3, SG-5. Your mission is to secure ancient facility on P3X729, access the Sentinel weapons platform's control systems, and neutralize the threat before it expands operational parameters. You are authorized to use any means necessary short of destroying the facility. That technology could prove invaluable if secured properly. Godspeed, and come home safe. Carter entered the dialing sequence. 7 chevrons locked with their distinctive thunder, and the event horizon exploded into being. Geralt's medallion screamed against his chest, not just from the Stargate but from what waited on the other side, ancient technology fully awakened, replicators swarming, and the kind of tactical nightmare that made survival statistical improbability. O'Neill checked his P-91 final time, then looked at his team with the expression of a man who'd led people into hell enough times to have preferred routes. Standard speech applies. Don't die, watch your sectors, and if anyone sees a self-destruct button, please consult with the group before pushing it. His eyes found Geralt. That includes you, Witcher. You see anything weird with that magic detector, you call it out immediately. Understood. They moved up the ramp in tactical formation, TLC on point with staff weapon charged, O'Neill and Carter on flanks, Daniel clutching his scanner with the nervous energy of someone whose job description included gets shot at while trying to read ancient languages, and Geralt positioned where his detection abilities could provide advance warning. The event horizon rippled before them, beautiful and terrible, a doorway to alien worlds and the kind of danger that made facing down a griffin look reasonable by comparison. Geralt materialized into chaos. The air on P3X729 crackled with ozone and ionized particles, the purple sky now streaked with energy discharge as the ancient sentinel tracked and eliminated replicators with mechanical precision. The ruins had transformed completely. What appeared as weathered stone during their first visit now revealed itself as active ancient architecture, walls glowing with power conduits, defensive barriers shimmering between pillars that rose like skeletal fingers toward alien sky. His enhanced senses registered everything simultaneously: the electric taste of discharged weapons, the metallic scrape of replicator blocks reconfiguring, the low-frequency hum of the Sentinel's targeting systems cycling through threat assessment protocols. His medallion vibrated so hard it burned against his chest, not warning of danger but screaming confirmation that they stood in the presence of something vastly more powerful than anything his world had produced. SG-3 and SG-5 materialized behind them in rapid succession, 30 soldiers fanning into defensive perimeter around the Stargate with professional efficiency. Weapons trained on the facility 200 meters north, where the Sentinel's central tower pulsed with energy that made the air shimmer. "Contact, 3 o'clock!" The shout came from SG-5's leader as replicators emerged from a depression in the terrain, a dozen units moving with insectoid coordination, their metallic blocks catching the alien sun's light as they reconfigured for combat. "Disruptors authorized, fire at will!" O'Neill's command cut through the chaos. The specialized weapons discharged with reality-tearing sounds, directed energy pulses striking replicators mid-charge. The effect was immediate and satisfying. Blocks lost cohesion, scattering like disturbed ants before collapsing into inert components. But even as the first wave fell, more emerged from concealment. Dozens, possibly hundreds, drawn to the gate activation like scavengers to fresh meat. Geralt fired his disruptor, the weapon's recoil different from any firearm he trained with. Not physical kickback but a sensation of pushing against quantum uncertainty itself. The pulse caught a replicator attempting to flank their position, disrupting its blocks mid-leap. The construct collapsed with metallic clatter, but 2 more took its place. "They're adapting already!" Carter's voice held scientific horror as she tracked the replicator's response. Dispersing formation, minimizing disruptor effectiveness. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before these weapons are useless. Then we move now." O'Neill gestured toward the facility. SG-3, hold the gate. Nothing gets through behind us. SG-5, establish fallback positions at 100-meter intervals. SG-1, we're going for the control chamber. Fast and loud, people. They ran. Geralt's enhanced speed let him keep pace with soldiers trained for exactly this kind of sprint under fire. Behind them, the sustained chatter of P-90s mixed with staff weapon discharges as SG-3 held the perimeter. Ahead, the ancient facility loomed larger, its defensive barriers recognizing incoming personnel and, critically, not vaporizing them on approach. "The Sentinel's not shooting at us," Daniel panted, his stamina significantly less impressive than the combat specialists. "That's good, right? That means it recognizes us as non-threats? Or it's saving us for dessert after it finishes the replicators," O'Neill countered, not slowing. "Let's not test its hospitality." The facility's entrance stood open, or had never closed, ancient architecture designed with arrogance that assumed nothing would dare breach their defenses. They plunged into shadow, interior corridors lit by the same luminescent strips that powered the exterior barriers. The walls hummed with active systems, ancient text scrolling across surfaces in patterns that made Geralt's Witcher-trained pattern recognition itch with warnings about magical traps and protective wards. Daniel's scanner beeped frantically. "Control chambers should be central, probably 3 levels down. If this follows standard ancient military facility design, there'll be multiple access points, but..." The corridor ahead exploded. Not from weapons fire, but from replicators breaching through the facility's walls like metallic termites. 6 units, then 12, blocks reconfiguring into combat configurations as they detected intruders. Disruptors! Carter fired first, her pulse catching the lead replicator and scattering its blocks. Tilsey followed with staff weapon, the energy blast vaporizing 2 more. But the remaining units adapted, spreading formation and moving with enhanced speed that suggested they'd already analyzed and countered disruptor tactics. Geralt holstered his disruptor, useless if they'd adapted, and drew his steel sword. The blade sang as it cleared the scabbard, familiar weight steadying him as a replicator lunged with blocks reforming into blade-like appendages. He sidestepped with Witcher reflexes, steel meeting metallic blocks in a shower of sparks that shouldn't be possible. But the silver trace alloy Carter had identified did something, disrupted the quantum bonds holding blocks together, not as effectively as the disruptor but enough to matter. The replicator's arm section fell away, blocks clattering to the floor. Geralt followed through with a thrust that pierced its central mass, twisting the blade and channeling what little psion energy he could manifest. Art erupted at perhaps 20% strength, but directed through the sword into the replicator's core, it created cascade failure. The construct collapsed. Note to self. O'Neill grunted, firing controlled bursts at another unit. Get everyone magic swords! They fought through 3 more replicator clusters, each engagement costing precious seconds and ammunition. The facility's layout revealed itself as they descended, ancient military precision mixed with technological sophistication Earth was centuries from achieving. Power conduits pulsed in walls, control interfaces waited dormant until approached by someone with the ATA gene, and everywhere, the sense of something vast and aware watching their progress. Daniel led them through a crystalline doorway that opened at Carter's touch, her ancient gene expression triggering recognition protocols. Beyond lay a circular chamber dominated by a central control interface, a raised platform surrounded by holographic displays showing tactical overlays of the facility, the surrounding area, and disturbingly, orbital space above the planet. There, Carter breathed, already moving toward the controls. That's the Sentinel's primary interface. If I can access command protocols. The holographic displays shifted, ancient text flooding across surfaces faster than Daniel could read. The Sentinel's attention turned inward, toward the chamber, toward the people who'd breached its inner sanctum. Geralt's medallion reached new intensity, pain now instead of warning, and his Witcher senses screamed danger in ways that bypassed rational thought and went straight to survival instinct. It knows we're here, he said quietly, hand moving to his sword hilt. And it's deciding whether we're threats. The chamber sealed. Crystalline doors slammed shut with finality that suggested they weren't opening without authorization, and the air filled with ozone as defensive systems charged. Ancient weapons, small-scale versions of the main Sentinel, emerged from concealed ports in the walls, tracking each team member with precise targeting. Carter's hands flew across the control interface, ancient text responding to her touch. I'm trying to access authorization codes, but the system is locked into combat protocol. It won't accept shutdown commands until threat assessment is complete. And how does it assess threats? O'Neill kept his P-90 trained on the nearest weapon port, though they all knew conventional firearms would be spectacularly useless against ancient defensive systems. Biometric scan, genetic markers, behavioral analysis. Carter's voice was strained, working through problems at computer speed while ancient weapons charged for firing. It's looking for replicator signatures, wraith genetic markers, anything flagged as existential threat in its database. We don't match any of those, Daniel said hopefully. So it should recognize us as. The scanners fixed on Geralt. His medallion, his mutations, the Witcher signs that marked him as deliberately enhanced human created through magical processes the ancients would have classified as dangerous genetic manipulation. To the Sentinel's assessment protocols, Geralt of Rivia registered as something between authorized personnel and potential wraith hybrid experiment. The weapons locked onto him with mechanical certainty. Carter, O'Neill's voice was tight with command authority, trying to solve an impossible problem. Tell me you can convince this thing the Witcher is friendly. I'm trying. Carter's fingers worked faster, pulling up genetic databases and authorization protocols. The Sentinel is treating him as unclassified enhanced human, similar to what the ancients encountered with early Wraith experiments. It's flagged him for elimination pending further analysis. Geralt stood perfectly still, every instinct screaming to move, to dodge, to fight. But ancient weapons tracked at speeds that made his enhanced reflexes look sluggish, and the chamber offered no cover adequate against energy weapons capable of vaporizing replicators. How long until it shoots? 30 seconds. Maybe less. Carter pulled up new interfaces, desperately searching for override commands. I need authorization codes I don't have, or I need to convince that Geralt isn't a threat, or what? TLC had positioned himself slightly in front of Geralt, staff weapon raised despite its futility. The Jaffa's willingness to intercede for someone he'd known barely a week carried weight Geralt hadn't expected. Or I need to show it genetic markers that supersede threat assessment. Carter's eyes widened with desperate inspiration. Geralt, your blood, Dr. Fraser documented unusual compounds, mutations that enhance your capabilities. If those mutations include markers the ancients would recognize as deliberately beneficial enhancement rather than wraith corruption. You want me to donate blood while ancient weapons prepare to vaporize me? Geralt's dry humor emerged even in crisis. I've had worse medical examinations. Carter pulled what looked like a medical scanner from her vest. This can do biometric analysis. If I can upload your genetic profile directly into the Sentinel's database with command authorization showing you as allied personnel. She trailed off, probability of success clearly not comforting. 20 seconds. Geralt extended his arm, letting Carter press the scanner against his skin. The device beeped, analyzing blood composition, genetic structure, the deliberate mutations that made him Witcher instead of human. Data streamed across ancient interfaces as Carter uploaded results directly into the Sentinel's assessment protocols. The weapon's charge intensified. 10 seconds. Ancient text scrolled faster, the Sentinel processing new information against millennia-old threat assessment databases. Witcher mutations, enhanced strength, accelerated healing, extended lifespan. Similar to Wraith characteristics. But different. No feeding mechanism, no genetic memory transfer, no hive-mind connection. Enhanced for combat against hostile entities, not for predation on human populations. 5 seconds. The weapon's targeting shifted fractionally. Still locked on Geralt, but probability calculations running in parallel, threat or ally. Wraith experiment or something else? The Sentinel's AI wrestled with classification problems its creators had never anticipated. 3 seconds. Carter added new data, pulling from her own genetic profile with its ATA gene expression, designating Geralt as allied personnel under her authorization. A gamble that her ancient gene would carry enough weight to override threat protocols. 1 second. The weapons powered down. Ancient text displayed across the central interface, and Daniel's voice carried relief mixed with academic fascination. It's reclassified him. Enhanced human beneficial mutation profile, allied personnel pending full behavioral assessment. We're clear. Geralt released breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, medallion's vibration finally decreasing from agony to merely painful. Your ancient technology has terrible hospitality protocols. You'd get used to almost being killed by our own defense systems, O'Neill said with feeling. Happens more often than you'd think. Now, Carter, can you shut this thing down before it decides to kill us again? Carter was already deep in the control interface, ancient text responding to her commands as she navigated through system architecture. The Sentinel is operating on automated defense protocols from the ancient Wraith War. It detected replicators, which matched threat profiles from ancient experience with their own replicator experiments, and activated to eliminate them. But it's also scanning for Wraith, for Goa'uld, for anything in its threat database. Can you modify the targeting parameters? Daniel stood beside her, translating ancient text faster than Geralt's enhanced reading could follow. If we can tell it to ignore human life signs while maintaining replicator hostility. I can. Carter's voice carried the weight of someone making decisions with galactic consequences. But modifying ancient AI without full system access is dangerous. The Sentinel could interpret parameter changes as hostile infiltration and activate self-destruct. Or it could expand threat assessment to include anyone who tampers with its protocols. Or, an explosion shook the facility. Distant but massive, followed by the unmistakable sound of replicators breaching deeper into the structure. Or we can let the killer robots access ancient weapons technology. O'Neill finished. Carter, make the call. Shut it down, redirect it, or leave it active. But decide fast because our options are decreasing rapidly. Carter's hands hovered over the controls, scientist and soldier wrestling with impossible choice. Then her fingers moved with decision certainty, entering commands that would reshape the Sentinel's purpose. I'm not shutting it down. I'm updating it. Ancient text flowed across displays as she worked. Adding current threat profiles, Goa'uld, Replicators, Ori when they arrive. Excluding authorized personnel, anyone with ATA gene, anyone flagged as allied in SGC databases. And most importantly, adding conditional protocols. Engage only hostile forces, protect inhabited worlds, defer to authorized command personnel. You're teaching it to be a weapon we can aim. Geralt observed quietly. In his world, mages who created autonomous magical constructs rarely managed to control them long-term. Sentience and purpose had ways of evolving beyond creator intent. I'm teaching it to be a guardian instead of an automated killer. Carter countered. The ancients built this to protect, not to exterminate everything that moves. I'm just updating its understanding of who needs protection. The Sentinel processed the new parameters. Ancient text scrolled, probability trees calculating implications, and somewhere in its quantum processors, an AI created millions of years ago adapted to new universe it barely recognized. Then it accepted the changes. The facility shuddered as the Sentinel pivoted from pure defense to targeted elimination. Its weapons tracked replicators throughout the structure, firing with precision that separated threat from infrastructure. The ancient defenses that had been holding replicators at bay now actively hunted them, energy pulses eliminating units with prejudice while carefully avoiding damage to the facility itself. Outside, visible through holographic tactical displays, the main Sentinel weapon adjusted targeting parameters. No longer firing at every replicator signature indiscriminately, it now calculated optimal firing solutions that eliminated threats while preserving the ancient facility it was designed to protect. Within minutes, replicator presence on P3X729 dropped to 0. The silence that followed felt profound. The Sentinel's weapons powered down to standby, having eliminated its primary threat. The facility's defensive barriers remained active but permeable to authorized personnel. And somewhere in its ancient programming, an AI waited for further instructions from the people who'd updated its purpose. Well, O'Neill said into the quiet. That worked better than expected. Which immediately makes me suspicious about what we're missing. Hammond's voice crackled through their comms, having received telemetry from the MALP monitoring their mission. SG-1 report. We're showing significant energy discharges and replicator elimination. Status? Mission successful, sir. Carter replied, still monitoring the Sentinel's systems. Ancient weapons platform secured and updated with current threat profiles. Replicator presence eliminated. Facility is stable and responding to command authorization. Outstanding work, Major. Prepare for extraction. And someone explain how we're supposed to guard an ancient weapons platform from here. That was the question, wasn't it? They'd secured the Sentinel, prevented replicators from accessing ancient technology, and created a weapon that could defend against threats Earth barely understood. But they'd also activated something they couldn't fully control, something built by a civilization that had achieved near godhood and then vanished, leaving their automated guardians to outlast them. Geralt's medallion had finally quieted to ambient hum, but his Witcher instincts remained alert. They'd solved one problem and created another, a powerful weapon that recognized them as allies today but might recalculate that assessment tomorrow. In his experience, ancient guardians always outlived the people who built them, and their definitions of protection rarely matched what those they protected actually wanted. The mission debrief stretched into its third hour as specialists analyzed every decision made in the ancient facility. Geralt sat at the conference table nursing his fourth cup of the SGC's weaponized coffee, watching military and scientific minds dissect their actions with the kind of thorough second-guessing that apparently followed every mission that didn't end in catastrophic failure. General Hammond stood at the room's head, expression carved from the kind of granite that suggested he'd made harder decisions than this before breakfast. So we now control an ancient weapons platform capable of orbital bombardment, programmed with threat profiles that include the Goa'uld, and we're trusting it won't decide Earth is a threat if someone sneezes wrong near its sensors. That's reductive, sir, but essentially accurate, Carter acknowledged, holographic displays showing the Sentinel's updated programming architecture. I've established command authorization protocols requiring my genetic signature plus authorization codes to modify targeting parameters. The Sentinel won't fire without confirming hostile intent through multiple assessment vectors, energy signatures, behavioral analysis, and threat database correlation. And if the Goa'uld develop new technology that doesn't match known profiles? Colonel Makepeace's skepticism was evident. Or if the Sentinel decides our weapons testing qualifies as hostile intent? Then we've got bigger problems than one ancient weapons platform, O'Neill interjected. Look, we can spend months debating the philosophical implications of automated defense systems, or we can accept that we just secured a strategic asset that could level the playing field against system lords who've been kicking our ass for 5 years. Geralt listened to the debate with growing recognition of patterns he'd seen before. People who'd acquired power they didn't fully understand, arguing about whether using it was justified versus dangerous. In his world, mages had the same conversations about every spell that could level cities. The debates never prevented the spells from being cast when desperation demanded. The real question, Daniel said, cleaning his glasses with the nervous energy of someone about to make an unpopular point, is whether we have the right to weaponize ancient technology for our own purposes. The ancients built the Sentinel to protect against specific threats during their war with the Wraith. We've reprogrammed it to target the Goa'uld, who the ancients never encountered. We're essentially using their legacy as a weapon in our war without their consent. The ancients are gone, TLC stated with the bluntness of someone who'd fought too many wars to afford philosophical luxury. Their technology remains. The Goa'uld enslave millions and claim divinity they do not possess. If ancient weapons can free the enslaved, the ancients' consent is irrelevant. Easy for us to say when we're not the ones who built it, Daniel countered. The ancients had rules about interference, about ascending beyond physical concerns. Using their weapons to fight our wars feels like grave robbing with extra steps. The argument spiraled into familiar territory, military necessity versus ethical consideration, pragmatism versus principle. Geralt had heard variations of this debate in noble courts and taverns across the continent. The people who wanted monsters killed always found justifications. The people concerned about methods always found objections. And the monsters kept killing while both sides argued. May I speak? Geralt's quiet question cut through the debate. All eyes turned to him, some curious, others wary. He was still the outsider here, the enhanced human from another world who'd been present barely a week. But he'd earned provisional trust through competence, and Hammond gestured for him to continue. In my world I hunt monsters, Geralt began, choosing words carefully. Villagers hire me to kill drowners, griffins, cursed spirits, things that kill their children and destroy their crops. And every time, there's debate. Some say the monster should be killed immediately. Others argue the monster has reasons, maybe even rights. And while they argue, more people die. He leaned forward, amber eyes reflecting the conference room's harsh lighting. I learned to ignore the debate and focus on one question: is the threat real, and can I stop it? If yes to both, I act. The philosophy comes later, usually from people who weren't in danger. His gaze swept across the table. Your Goa'uld are parasites enslaving humans and claiming divinity. That's not philosophy, that's monsters wearing human faces. You have a weapon that could stop them. The only question that matters is whether you're willing to use it. The silence that followed carried weight. Hammond's expression suggested Geralt had articulated something he'd been thinking but couldn't say as commanding officer. O'Neill looked vindicated. Daniel appeared troubled. Carter seemed to be running probability calculations on whether Geralt's pragmatism was strategic asset or dangerous liability. The Witcher makes a compelling point, Makepeace said slowly. We're at war. We use the weapons we have, or we lose. But we're not just fighting a war. We're trying to build alliances, free the Jaffa, negotiate with the Tok'ra. Daniel protested. If we start using ancient superweapons to eliminate Goa'uld wholesale, we become the aggressive threat. Other races will see us as dangerous as the system lords, just with better technology. Then we use it strategically. Carter suggested, finding middle ground between extremes. The Sentinel stays on P3X729 as a defensive asset. We don't broadcast its existence, but if Goa'uld forces threaten Earth or our allies, we have the capability to respond. It's deterrence, not aggression. Hammond nodded slowly. Acceptable compromise. Major Carter, you'll maintain remote monitoring of the Sentinel's systems. Any sign it's deviating from authorized parameters, we shut it down or destroy the facility. Colonel O'Neill, SG-1 will conduct weekly verification missions to ensure the platform remains secure. His eyes found Geralt. And Mr. Geralt, your ability to detect ancient technology makes you a valuable asset for those verification missions. Assuming you're willing to continue working with us. It wasn't quite a job offer, but close enough. Geralt had been expecting this. The point where temporary cooperation became something more permanent, where his unique capabilities made him useful enough to keep around despite the complications his presence created. In his world, this was when contracts got signed and coin changed hands. Here, apparently it involved bureaucracy and rank structures. I'll help, Geralt said simply. Until I find a way home or you decide I'm more trouble than I'm worth. Oh, you're definitely trouble, O'Neill said with a slight grin. But so are we, and misery loves company. Welcome to SG-1's extended dysfunctional family. The debrief concluded with tactical assignments and equipment requisitions. Geralt was officially designated a civilian consultant with Level 4 security clearance. Not enough to access everything, but sufficient to operate alongside SG teams on off-world missions. He'd maintain quarters at the SGC, continue medical monitoring with Dr. Fraser, and receive ongoing briefings about galactic politics, technology, and the various ways the universe tried to kill people who stepped through the Stargate. As the room emptied, TLC approached with his characteristic measured calm. You spoke well, Geralt of Rivia. Many warriors struggle to articulate the difference between necessary violence and unnecessary cruelty. You understand this distinction instinctively. I've had 80 years to learn it. TLC's expression held the weight of someone who'd carried similar contradictions. The Jaffa served the Goa'uld for generations, believing they are gods. When we learn the truth, that we serve parasites and false divinity, we become traitors to everything we were raised to honor. My people call me Chauvier traitor. They hunt me as you were hunted as a mutant. Yet I continue, because the cause is just even when the cost is high. We're both traitors to what we were made to be, Geralt observed. You were made to serve gods. I was made to hunt monsters. But we chose different paths because the alternatives were worse. Indeed. TLC inclined his head with respect. The Jaffa rebellion needs allies who understand this struggle. If you would consider addressing some of our leaders during your time with SGC, your perspective might prove valuable. Warriors who have rejected their creator's purpose find strength in knowing others have walked similar paths. Before Geralt could respond, alarms shrieked through the facility. Not the standard gate activation warning, but something sharper, Combat alert, security breach, the kind of sound that meant immediate threat to the base itself. Hammond's voice thundered through the intercom. All SG teams to armory. Unauthorized off-world activation. IDC not received. Iris holding but detecting massive energy buildup on the other side. They ran. Through corridors suddenly filled with armed personnel, down to the gate room where the Stargate's event horizon pressed against the Iris. But something was wrong. Energy crackled around the titanium barrier's edges, not the normal stable wormhole, but something fighting to force itself through. The Iris groaned under pressure it was never designed to withstand, molecular bonds beginning to fail. Carter reached the control room first, her fingers flying across consoles. Sir, there's a massive power surge on the other side. Someone's trying to force the Iris open by overloading the wormhole with energy. If they succeed, the Iris screamed. Metal tore with the sound of reality breaking, and a hole approximately 3 feet in diameter opened at the barrier's center. Through it, visible for just a moment, was a Hotak mothership's interior and a figure that made Geralt's medallion vibrate with sudden violence. Apophis. The system lord stood before a control console, his Jaffa prime at his side, and his face held the arrogant certainty of someone who'd planned this carefully. Then something small and metallic flew through the gap. About the size of a basketball, covered in ancient text, pulsing with energy that made every sensor in the control room scream warnings. Grenade! O'Neill's shout came too late. The device hit the gate room floor and activated. Not an explosion, a pulse of energy that expanded outward in a sphere, and where it touched, technology died. Lights cut out. Computers sparked and went dark. Weapons systems offline. Every piece of Naquata-based technology within 50 meters ceased functioning, drained of power by whatever ancient device Apophis had acquired. In the sudden darkness lit only by emergency lighting, the Iris's hole widened. And through it, Jaffa began to pour. Staff weapons charged. Warriors loyal to false gods, trained for millennia in combat, dropping through the gap in Earth's defenses with the precision of elite soldiers. They formed defensive positions around the Stargate, establishing beachhead while more followed. Fall back! Hammond's order cut through chaos. All personnel withdraw to secondary positions. Seal the blast doors! But the blast doors required power the ancient device had drained. And the Jaffa kept coming, a dozen now, then 20, establishing a perimeter that would allow Apophis himself to step through once they'd secured the area. Geralt drew his swords, technology independent, powered by his own muscles and Witcher mutations. Around him, SG-1 did the same, pulling knives and falling back to positions where they could fight with whatever worked. The Jaffa advanced, staff weapons tracking targets, and at the gate, more warriors continued emerging. Earth's primary defense had been breached. And Apophis, system lord who declared Earth his personal target since they'd first embarrassed him years ago, was coming to claim his prize personally. The invasion of Stargate Command had begun. The gate room had become a kill box, and Geralt found himself fighting in the worst possible terrain, enclosed space, limited cover, enemies with superior numbers and positioned advantage. The kind of tactical nightmare that usually ended with dead witchers and surviving monsters. But he'd survived worse odds. The first Jaffa warrior advanced with staff weapon raised, the serpent-headed design charged and tracking. Geralt moved before the blast discharged, Witcher reflexes putting him inside the weapon's firing arc. His steel sword took the Jaffa's arm at the elbow, clean cut through armor and bone, then reversed to open the warrior's throat. The Jaffa fell without sound, staff weapon clattering across concrete. 2 more filled the gap immediately, coordinated and professional. Geralt dropped low, sliding beneath their overlapping fire, silver sword flashing upward to catch one warrior in the gut, while his boot drove into the other's knee with enhanced strength that shattered the joint. He rolled to his feet between fallen bodies, already moving toward the next threat. The gate room had descended into brutal close combat. TLC fought with staff weapon used as quarterstaff, the Jaffa's superior combat experience evident as he disabled 3 warriors in rapid succession. O'Neill had acquired a Jaffa blade, fighting with Special Forces brutality that prioritized efficiency over elegance. Carter wielded a combat knife, using the metal ramp for height advantage while calling out tactical positions. But more Jaffa kept coming through the compromised iris. 30 now. 40. They'd secured the gate room and were pushing outward, trying to establish control over adjacent corridors. If they took the control room, they'd have access to facility schematics, security systems, and the ability to open more breaches for reinforcements. Geralt's medallion screamed as something massive approached the event horizon. Not a device, a presence. Apophis himself, preparing to step through now that his warriors had established beachhead. The system lord's arrogance demanded he personally claim victory over the Tauri who'd defied him. "We need to close that iris," Carter shouted from the control room, trying to restore power to the damaged systems. "If Apophis comes through with more forces, we can't hold." But the ancient device's energy drain was comprehensive. Every system within its radius was dead, and even Carter's genius couldn't restore power to equipment that had been completely drained. They needed the device destroyed or disabled, and it sat in the center of the Jaffa formation like a metallic heart pumping death through Earth's defenses. "I can reach it," Geralt said, assessing angles and probability. 20 meters across open floor, through concentrated Jaffa positions, to a device that was probably designed to kill anyone who touched it without proper authorization. Standard Witcher contract, really, just with alien technology instead of cursed artifacts. "Negative," O'Neill grunted, deflecting a staff weapon blast with the corpse used as improvised shield. "You'll get vaporized before covering 10 feet. Then I need a distraction." Geralt caught O'Neill's eyes. "Something that draws their fire and gives me 5 seconds. O'Neill's expression suggested this was a terrible idea, which probably meant it was the best option available. "TLC. Pattern Omega, on my mark." The Jaffa warrior understood immediately, falling back to O'Neill's position. Whatever Pattern Omega meant, it apparently involved both of them charging directly into the enemy formation with the kind of aggressive stupidity that sometimes worked because nobody expected it. "Mark!" They moved. O'Neill and TLC broke from cover, firing acquired staff weapons while advancing directly toward the Jaffa line. The enemy formation pivoted, warriors redirecting fire toward the obvious threats, and for exactly 3 seconds, the path to the ancient device opened. Geralt ran. Enhanced speed let him cover ground faster than human baseline, but staff weapon blasts tracked his movement. Energy pulses scorched air beside his head, one close enough to singe his white hair. He threw himself into a slide, passing beneath overlapping fire, boots hitting a fallen Jaffa's body and using it as springboard to launch toward the device. His hands closed around metal pulsing with power that made his medallion shriek. Ancient text covered its surface, glowing with malevolent energy, and the moment he touched it, the device attacked. Energy surged through his nervous system, designed to kill unauthorized personnel through catastrophic neural overload. But Witcher mutations that let him survive potions that would kill normal humans also gave him neurological resilience beyond human baseline. The energy burned, felt like lightning in his veins, but his enhanced physiology absorbed and distributed the damage faster than it could accumulate. He had perhaps 10 seconds before even his mutations failed against sustained ancient power. Geralt channeled everything he had into Ard. The sign manifested weakly, fighting this universe's physics, but he wasn't trying for massive effect. Just concentrated force, directed through his hands into the device's crystalline core. Kinetic energy met ancient engineering, and something inside the device fractured. The energy drain stopped. Lights flickered throughout the facility as power began restoring to drained systems. And the ancient device, its crystalline matrix shattered by Witcher sign used as improvised hammer, died with a sound like breaking glass. Staff weapon blasts converged on Geralt's position. He rolled, feeling energy pulses superheat air where he'd been, enhanced reflexes barely sufficient to avoid being vaporized. His left shoulder took a glancing hit. Armor absorbed most of the impact, but the remaining energy burned through to flesh. Pain registered and was filed away, adrenaline and combat focus overriding everything except the need to survive the next 5 seconds. Then the iris sealed. With power restored, Carter had slammed the titanium barrier shut, cutting off the wormhole and Apophis's invasion route. The System Lord's plan: to use ancient technology to force his way into Earth's most secure facility, had failed. But 40 Jaffa warriors remained trapped inside the SGC, and they fought with the desperation of soldiers who knew survival meant victory or death with honor. "All personnel, converge on gate room!" Hammond's voice thundered through restored communications. "Lethal force authorized. No prisoners unless they surrender immediately." SG teams poured into the chamber from every access point. P-90s chattered, staff weapons discharged in both directions, and the gate room became a killing ground. The Jaffa fought magnificently, disciplined, coordinated, buying every inch of ground with blood. But they were cut off from reinforcement, surrounded by an entire military installation, and facing warriors who'd spent 5 years learning to fight false gods. Geralt found himself fighting alongside TLC, the two of them moving with the synchronized precision of warriors who understood combat rhythms. The Jaffa targeted TLC specifically, Traitor and Chauvier, the one who'd rejected the gods and inspired others to rebellion. They wanted his death, wanted to prove that defying the System Lords led only to destruction. They learned otherwise. TLC fought with the controlled fury of someone who'd spent 100 years serving false gods and now spent every moment proving they were mortal. His staff weapon became extension of his will, every blast placed with precision that came from decades commanding Apophis's own warriors. And when the staff weapon ran dry, he switched to captured blades and fought with brutal efficiency that reminded everyone present why the Jaffa were feared across the galaxy. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When the last Jaffa warrior fell, refusing surrender, dying with weapon in hand as their code demanded, the gate room looked like something from humanity's worst wars. Bodies on both sides. Blood on concrete. The acrid smell of discharged energy weapons and the copper tang of death. Geralt leaned against the wall, assessing damage. His left shoulder burned where the staff weapon blast had caught him, already healing but slower than usual. The energy discharge had damaged tissue deep enough to challenge even Witcher regeneration. Multiple bruises, cuts from near misses, exhaustion from channeling signs while fighting for his life. But alive. Functional. Ready to fight again if Apophis was stupid enough to try another assault. Dr. Fraser appeared with medical teams, moving through casualties with professional efficiency. She stopped at Geralt, taking in his burned shoulder with clinical assessment. "You need treatment. That's a 3rd-degree staff weapon burn. I've had worse." Geralt's standard response to concerned medical personnel, true in this universe as it had been in his own. "That's not reassuring." But she moved on to more critical casualties, trusting his enhanced healing to handle injuries that would hospitalize normal humans. Hammond descended to the gate room, surveying the carnage with an expression carved from stone. "Casualty report? 14 wounded, 3 critical." One of the medics replied. 7 dead, 4 SF personnel, 2 SG-5 members, 1 technician caught in crossfire. Could have been much worse if the invasion had succeeded. Could have been. If Geralt hadn't destroyed the ancient device. If Carter hadn't sealed the iris in time. If the Jaffa had reached the control room. The mathematics of survival and death, calculated in seconds and decisions made without time for thought. "Mr. Geralt." Hammond's attention fixed on him with the weight of command authority recognizing debt. "You destroyed the device that disabled our defenses. At considerable personal risk and without waiting for orders. I should probably reprimand you for operating outside command structure. But you won't," O'Neill interjected, limping slightly from his own injuries. "Because he saved our collective asses and prevented Apophis from conquering the SGC. Which would have been bad. Really, really bad. Hammond's expression softened fractionally. Accurate assessment, Colonel. Mr. Geralt, you've proven yourself under fire. As of this moment, you're no longer a consultant. You're a full field operative assigned to SG-1, with all the authority and responsibility that entails. He paused, then added with something approaching warmth. Welcome to the team. Try not to die. I'll make the effort. Geralt accepted the promotion with the same dry humor he'd accepted every impossible contract in his former life. Different world, different monsters, same fundamental reality. People needed someone willing to fight the things that wanted them dead. Carter approached, tablet already displaying analysis data. Sir, the ancient device Apophis used, I've got fragments to analyze. If he has more of these, he could breach our defenses again. We need to understand how he acquired ancient technology, and what else he might have access to. The Tok'ra, TLC said quietly, his expression darkening. Apophis has been unusually successful recently in acquiring advanced technology. Either he has discovered a cache of ancient devices, or someone is supplying him with weapons beyond standard Goa'uld capabilities. Or both. Daniel had arrived, looking shaken but unhurt. If there's a black market for ancient technology, and if the Tok'ra or other factions are participating, Apophis could be stockpiling weapons we can't defend against. The energy drain device is just the beginning. The implications spread like poison through the room. Earth had been operating under the assumption that their technology, reverse-engineered Goa'uld devices plus ancient artifacts discovered through exploration, gave them rough parity with the System Lords. But if Apophis had access to ancient weapons, if other System Lords acquired similar capabilities, the balance of power shifted dramatically. We need intelligence, Hammond decided. Contact the Tok'ra, find out what they know about ancient technology trading. SG teams will increase survey missions targeting ancient sites. And we'll establish better security protocols for ancient devices. No more artifacts sitting in storage without proper shielding and containment. There's another problem, Geralt said quietly, his medallion still humming with residual energy. Apophis knows about me now. His Jaffa saw what I can do, destroying ancient technology, fighting beyond human baseline. System Lords collect powerful beings as hosts or weapons. I'm now a target. Join the club, O'Neill said without sympathy. We're all targets. That's what happens when you embarrass false gods repeatedly. They take it personally. He clapped Geralt on his uninjured shoulder with surprising camaraderie. But they have to catch us first, and we've gotten pretty good at being difficult to kill. The gate room began the slow process of cleanup, removing bodies, repairing equipment, assessing structural damage. Geralt watched Jaffa warriors being carried away, thinking about the ones he'd killed. Slaves, really? Enhanced humans carrying parasites, raised from birth to worship false gods. Not monsters in the traditional sense, but victims of monsters wearing human faces. In his world, the lines between monster and victim were sometimes blurred. Cursed individuals, possessed humans, creatures created through others' malice. He'd learned to identify which deserved mercy and which required steel. The Jaffa occupied that uncomfortable middle ground, dangerous but not irredeemable, enslaved but still responsible for their actions. TLC had chosen freedom. Others would follow eventually, the rebellion spreading until the System Lords' armies turned against them. But until then, Witcher and Jaffa would keep killing each other, both serving larger purposes either had chosen. Come on, Carter said gently, noticing his expression. Medical Bay. Dr. Fraser will want to monitor your healing and make sure that staff weapon burn doesn't have complications. Then debrief, equipment requisition, and probably another 3 hours of meetings about security protocols. The glamorous life of a monster hunter. Geralt muttered, but he followed. The fight was over. The monsters had retreated. And Earth remained defended for another day. But Apophis would be planning his next assault. And somewhere in the galaxy, a system lord who'd been embarrassed too many times, was deciding that the white-haired human who destroyed ancient technology was too dangerous to leave alive. The hunt was just beginning. 3 weeks after Apophis's failed invasion, Geralt stood in the SGC's observation deck watching Earth's Stargate cycle through its daily mission rotations. SG-3 departing for resource survey. SG-7 returning from diplomatic talks with a minor system lord who'd shown interest in defecting. SG-12 heading out for what O'Neill had described as the boring kind of exploration where nothing tries to kill you, probably. His shoulder had healed completely, Witcher mutations erasing even the scar tissue from the staff weapon burn. Dr. Fraser had documented the regeneration process with scientific fascination that made Geralt feel like a specimen again, but her enthusiasm was genuine rather than exploitative. She wanted to understand, not dissect. It was a distinction he'd learned to appreciate. The observation deck's door opened behind him. Geralt's enhanced hearing identified Carter's footsteps before she spoke. Lighter than O'Neill's military stride, more purposeful than Daniel's academic shuffle. "Got a minute?" She carried a tablet displaying data that looked simultaneously exciting and concerning. "I finished analyzing the ancient device fragments from Apophis's invasion. The results are problematic." Geralt turned from the window, amber eyes reflecting the gate room's lights below. "How problematic?" "The device was ancient manufacture, but it had been modified recently." Carter pulled up molecular analysis showing crystalline structures that didn't match ancient engineering standards. Someone with advanced understanding of ancient technology took a standard energy weapon and converted it into a technology disruptor. The modifications are sophisticated. Whoever did this understands both ancient physics and Goa'uld systems well enough to create a hybrid device. "The Tok'ra," Geralt said, the pieces assembling with Witcher pattern recognition. "They have ancient knowledge and oppose the Goa'uld. But they also have their own agenda, and Earth's power threatens their position as the primary resistance." Carter's expression suggested she'd reached similar conclusions, and didn't like them. "It's possible. The Tok'ra have been evasive about sharing intelligence lately. They claim it's operational security, but it feels like they're deliberately keeping us dependent on their information networks." She hesitated, then continued. "There's a mission. The Tok'ra contacted us requesting a meeting. They say they have intelligence about Apophis's next move. General Hammond wants SG-1 to attend, and specifically requested you accompany us." "Why me?" "Because you can sense Goa'uld symbiotes," Carter said bluntly. "The Tok'ra claim to be allies, but we've never been able to independently verify their identities. They could be infiltrated by regular Goa'uld posing as resistance fighters, and we'd never know. But your medallion reacts to symbiotes regardless of whether they're Tok'ra or System Lord. You're our verification system." It made tactical sense, even if it positioned Geralt as living lie detector in a political situation where trust was already fragile. "When do we leave?" 2 hours. "And Geralt?" Carter met his eyes seriously. "The Tok'ra don't appreciate being questioned. If you detect something wrong, be subtle. We need their intelligence network, even if we can't fully trust them." The mission briefing was brief. They'd gate to a neutral planet where Tok'ra operatives maintained a hidden base, meet with their leadership council, receive intelligence about Apophis's activities, and return. Standard diplomatic mission, complicated by the fact that their allies might also be playing games that could get Earth conquered. The team assembled in the gate room at 1400 hours. O'Neill wore his standard tactical vest, an expression of someone expecting things to go sideways. Daniel carried translation equipment, and the nervous energy of a scholar about to negotiate with people who'd lived multiple lifetimes. Tilsey stood with quiet readiness, his position as former First Prime making Tok'ra interactions complicated. They respected his rebellion but distrusted his methods. And Geralt, still adapting to the weight of SGC-issue tactical gear over his leather armor, swords across his back standing out against the team's modern weapons. He'd become a walking contradiction, medieval weaponry and enhanced biology operating in a universe of energy weapons and faster-than-light travel. The Stargate activated, event horizon stabilizing as the 7th chevron locked. Geralt's medallion hummed with now familiar intensity, no longer painful but still unsettling. He'd never gotten used to being torn apart at atomic level and reconstituted light years away. Probably never would. They stepped through. The planet on the other side was unremarkable. Standard habitable world, breathable atmosphere, minimal native life. The Tok'ra base was underground, access to a cave system that descended into crystalline tunnels grown by their technology. The tunnel crystals glowed with soft bioluminescence, organic and technological simultaneously, the kind of hybrid approach that characterized Tok'ra engineering. Geralt's medallion began vibrating the moment they entered the tunnels. Not violently like it had with the preserved gold specimen, but steady and insistent. Symbiotes ahead. Multiple. The Tok'ra hosts waiting to meet them. The council chamber was surprisingly modest. Circular room with crystalline walls, simple seating, and 5 Tok'ra representatives who rose as SG-1 entered. Geralt's enhanced senses analyzed each one, his medallion providing data his conscious mind translated into threat assessment. For read as expected, symbiote presence similar to what he sensed from TLC, but with different energy signatures. Willing blending, equal partnership between host and symbiote. The 5th, however, made his medallion's vibrations spike sharply. Wrong frequency, aggressive energy pattern, the signature of domination rather than cooperation. That Tok'ra wasn't Tok'ra. It was Goa'uld, perfectly disguised, waiting among Earth's supposed allies. Geralt kept his expression neutral, Witcher training hiding the recognition. Carter's warning echoed, be subtle. If he revealed the infiltrator immediately, it might bolt, or activate fail-safes. Better to observe, gather information, and report once they'd extracted whatever intelligence the legitimate Tok'ra provided. The Tok'ra's spokeswoman stepped forward. An older woman whose eyes reflected the symbiote Selmak, Jacob Carter's partner. Major Carter. Colonel O'Neill. TLC. Dr. Jackson. Her eyes found Geralt with curiosity. And the enhanced human we've heard about. Geralt of Rivia, monster hunter from another world. Stories travel fast. Geralt replied neutrally. The Tok'ra have extensive intelligence networks. When someone destroys ancient technology with abilities that shouldn't exist in this galaxy, we take notice. Selmak's host smiled, but the expression carried complexity. You represent an unknown variable in the war against the system lords. The question is whether you're an asset or a liability. We could ask the same about the Tok'ra. O'Neill said with his characteristic directness. You request meetings, promise intelligence, but you're holding back. The ancient device Apophis used to breach our defenses. You knew about it. Didn't warn us. Why? The chamber's temperature seemed to drop. The Tok'ra representatives exchanged glances, internal conversations between host and symbiote happening faster than external speech. Finally, Selmak spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of difficult truths. Because we're losing the war. Apophis has acquired not one ancient device but dozens, possibly hundreds. He's discovered a cache, a repository left by the ancients during their conflict with the Wraith. Technology designed for warfare at a scale even the system lords haven't achieved. If he unlocks the repository's full capabilities, he won't just conquer Earth. He'll dominate the entire galaxy. The silence that followed was profound. Daniel broke it first, his voice strained. How long have you known? 3 months. We've been trying to locate the repository ourselves, to deny Apophis access. But he's guarded the location with paranoia that suggests he knows we're searching. Selmak's expression held genuine regret. We didn't tell you because Earth's tendency toward direct action would have tipped our hand. Apophis would have moved the repository, and we'd lose our only chance to prevent catastrophe. So you let him attack Earth to preserve your operational security, Carter said, her voice carefully controlled. Let him breach our defenses, kill our people, because warning us might have complicated your plans. Yes. The admission was stark, unapologetic. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Earth is one planet. Apophis's conquest would enslave billions. We made the calculation that seemed necessary. Geralt watched the Goa'uld infiltrator during this exchange. The false Tok'ra maintained perfect composure, but his medallion detected subtle energy fluctuations, the symbiote communicating externally, probably sending real-time intelligence to its true masters. Every word spoken in this chamber was being transmitted to System Lord forces, which meant Apophis now knew the Tok'ra were hunting his ancient repository. And if the Goa'uld had infiltrated Tok'ra leadership, they might know where the rebels' own operations were hidden. "We have a problem," Geralt said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "One of your council is Goa'uld. Not Tok'ra, System Lord Infiltrator. Probably has been for months, reporting everything you've planned." The chamber erupted. Tok'ra representatives spun toward each other with expressions of shock and accusation. The infiltrator moved faster than human baseline, hand reaching for something concealed in robes. But Geralt had been tracking that particular target since entering the chamber. His silver sword cleared its scabbard in one fluid motion, the blade intercepting the infiltrator's arm before the weapon could be drawn. The false Tok'ra's eyes flashed with Goa'uld possession, voice shifting to the dual tones of symbiote speech. "Foolish Tauri! Apophis knows of your alliance's weakness. The Tok'ra are compromised, infiltrated at every level. Your rebellion ends today." Staff weapon blasts erupted from the tunnel entrance. Jaffa warriors materialized from concealment. They'd been waiting, positioned for exactly this scenario. The Tok'ra Council scrambled for defensive positions while SG-1 returned fire with practiced efficiency. Geralt's sword took the infiltrator's head in a single stroke, silver edge cutting through flesh and symbiote both. The Goa'uld died screaming, its host's body collapsing as the parasite within was severed from its nervous system. No extraction, no saving the host. The infiltrator had sacrificed its victim the moment it drew weapons in a diplomatic chamber. "Fall back!" Selmac's command cut through the chaos. "The base is compromised. Activate emergency protocols." The crystalline tunnels began collapsing, Tok'ra failsafes triggering to prevent enemy capture of their technology. But the collapse was controlled, designed to create escape routes while burying access tunnels. SG-1 followed Selmac through passages that shifted and reformed, the crystalline structure responding to her symbiote's commands. They emerged into a secondary chamber where a smaller Stargate waited, a backup, hidden from sensors and protected by technology Earth could barely detect. Selmac moved to the DHD, dialing coordinates while Jaffa pursued through collapsing tunnels behind them. "Where does this gate lead?" O'Neill demanded, maintaining cover fire while the wormhole established. "A safe location. Tok'ra emergency fallback." Selmac's expression was grim. "If Geralt is correct about infiltration at multiple levels, our entire network is compromised. We'll need to rebuild from scratch, verify every operative, assume everything Apophis knows our plans." "Later," Carter said urgently. "Right now, we need to get through that gate before." The tunnel ceiling collapsed 30 feet behind them, cutting off Jaffa pursuit but also trapping them in the chamber with limited options. The Stargate shimmered with active event horizon, promising escape but also unknown destination. Trust the Tok'ra or take chances with Jaffa. They chose trust and dived through. The destination was another underground facility, but different architecture, older, more ancient than Tok'ra. Geralt's medallion reacted immediately, not to symbiotes but to technology dormant for millennia. They'd emerged in an ancient outpost, hidden and forgotten, now serving as the Tok'ra's ultimate fallback position. Selmac sealed the gate behind them, entering commands that would make their destination untraceable. Only then did she turn to face them, expression carrying the weight of someone whose entire operation had just been exposed as compromised. "You saved us," she said to Geralt directly. "Detected the infiltrator when our own scans missed it. The Tok'ra owe you a debt. We'll discuss terms later." Hammond's voice crackled through their radios, Apparently the ancient outpost had communications capabilities. SG-1 Sitrep, we detected your emergency transit. Status? O'Neill keyed his radio. Tok'ra base compromised, infiltrator eliminated, we're at secondary location with partial Tok'ra leadership. Sir, the situation is worse than we thought. Apophis has an ancient weapons cache, and the Tok'ra have been playing politics while Earth got used as bait. Understood. Return to base for full debrief. And Colonel? Bring the Tok'ra with you. It's time we had a very frank conversation about Alliance expectations. They remained in the ancient outpost for 3 hours while Tok'ra operatives verified the facility's security and arranged transportation back to Earth. Geralt spent the time exploring, his medallion guiding him to chambers filled with dormant technology that hadn't been activated in millions of years. In one chamber, he found records. Ancient data crystals containing information about the war against the Wraith, the construction of Stargates, and something else. References to enhanced humans, genetic modifications, experiments in creating warriors capable of fighting threats the ancients themselves found challenging. The ancients had created their own witchers, in a sense. Enhanced beings designed to hunt monsters. And like the witchers, those experiments had been abandoned when the cost became too high and the ancients found other solutions. Geralt? Daniel's voice interrupted his examination of the data crystals. We're heading back. You found something? History, Geralt replied, carefully replacing the crystals. The ancients weren't as enlightened as everyone thinks. They made the same mistakes every civilization makes. Trying to create perfect warriors, then abandoning them when the experiments got complicated. Sounds familiar, Daniel said quietly, understanding the parallel. The ancients ascended, leaving their creations behind. The mages who made witchers died, leaving you to deal with their legacy. Every advanced civilization seems to repeat the pattern. Which means the Goa'uld will too, eventually. Geralt followed Daniel back toward the Stargate chamber. System lords playing with ancient technology they don't understand, creating weapons they can't control. It's going to end badly for everyone. Then we'd better make sure they don't succeed, O'Neill said, overhearing. Come on, Witcher. Time to go home and figure out how to stop a system lord from conquering the galaxy with stolen ancient superweapons. Just another Tuesday for SG-1. They stepped through the Stargate one final time, returning to Earth with intelligence that would reshape the war against the Goa'uld. Apophis had ancient weapons. The Tok'ra were compromised. And somewhere in the galaxy, a repository of ancient technology waited to be claimed by whoever reached it first. Geralt had hunted monsters across dimensions, fought killer robots and false gods, and earned his place among Earth's defenders. But the real hunt was just beginning. Apophis would come for him eventually. System lords didn't forget those who'd humiliated them. And when that confrontation came, it wouldn't be about survival. It would be about proving that monsters, even those with armies and ancient weapons, could still be killed by someone who'd spent a lifetime learning how. The White Wolf had found a new path. And the galaxy's false gods were about to learn what happened when you threatened the worlds a Witcher had chosen to protect. The months that followed Apophis's failed invasion and the Tok'ra infiltration became a turning point in Earth's war against the System Lords. Geralt of Rivia, the enhanced human from another world who'd stumbled through a portal intersection, had proven himself not just capable but essential, a living detection system for Goa'uld infiltration, a warrior whose abilities complemented modern firearms and ancient technology, and a pragmatic voice in debates that too often drowned in politics. SG-1's missions took on new urgency as they raced to locate Apophis's ancient weapons repository before he could fully exploit its contents. The Tok'ra, humbled by their security failures, committed to genuine intelligence sharing rather than strategic manipulation. And across the galaxy, whispers spread among his signs gradually strengthened as he learned to work with this universe's physics rather than against them. His medallion became integral to SGC's security protocols, detecting threats conventional sensors missed. And his swords, medieval weapons in a galaxy of energy blasts and orbital bombardment, earned respect from warriors who understood that sometimes the old ways worked best. But the system lords had noticed him. Apophis wanted him dead or converted. Other system lords debated whether an enhanced human represented opportunity or threat. And somewhere in the shadows, forces were moving that would test whether a Witcher's lifetime of experience hunting monsters prepared him for the kind of warfare that spanned galaxies and involved technology that rewrote reality's rules. Geralt stood in the SGC gate room, watching another team depart through the event horizon, and reflected on how far he'd come from tracking an interdimensional creature through a magical portal. He'd wanted only to complete the hunt, return home, collect his coin. Instead, he'd found himself defending an entire world from parasitic false gods, fighting alongside soldiers who'd become something approaching friends, and accepting that sometimes the path led places you never expected. The Stargate cycled down, its event horizon collapsing until the next team's departure. Above in the control room, Hammond reviewed mission assignments. In the lab, Carter analyzed ancient technology fragments. In the briefing room, Daniel translated texts that might reveal Apophis's next move. And in the armory, Teal'c maintained weapons with the quiet dedication of a warrior who'd found a cause worth the cost. They were family now, in the way soldiers became family when shared danger created bonds stronger than blood. And Geralt, the mutant monster hunter who'd spent a lifetime being called freak and abomination, had found acceptance among people who fought the same darkness he'd always fought, just with different monsters and higher stakes. The hunt continued. The false gods still claimed dominion over millions. The ancient repository remained hidden, waiting for whoever found it first. And across the galaxy, the Goa'uld War ground forward with the terrible momentum of conflicts that consumed civilizations. But Earth had a Witcher now. And monsters, whether they wore human faces or commanded armies of enslaved warriors, all shared one fundamental truth that Geralt had learned over 80 years of hunting them. They could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could die. The galaxy's false gods were about to learn that lesson personally. Indeed. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories.